Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Audio Fanfics and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto became the Dragon Sage King, and Hinata, Kurenai, Yugao and Tayuya fell for the Forgotten Heir, Part 3. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. After they entered the building together, Team 12 immediately saw a blockade made up of other genin. Approaching the group, they saw two chunin that were blocking a door, preventing anyone from getting in. Hey, what are you doing? Please let us in, said a girl wearing a pink sleeveless kipao-style blouse and green pants, her hair done into two buns. But after she said that, one of the chunin backhanded her lightly across the face. Tenten, said a boy with a bowl-style hairstyle with bushy eyebrows wearing a green bodysuit with orange leg warmers with bandages wrapped around his arm. As he helped his teammate up. Ha! Just look at how weak you are. If you can't take even that, you have no chance in the exam. One of the chunin said as some of the genin around him looked nervous at the piece of information. Looking at his teammates, Yakumo and Satsuki nodded, noticing that the door number was hidden under a genjutsu. The team made their way slowly around the group, now knowing that it was intentional to weed out those who were unable to detect a simple genjutsu, which made Yakumo sigh. But as they were about to head up the stair, they saw a scuffle happen. Get out of the way! Sasuke shouted at one of the chunin. After all the headache of having to work with his useless team to stop a kidnapper from taking Moegi, they were finally allowed to join the exams when the person they stopped was Iruka, who was testing them to see if they were ready. Yeah, get out of Sasuke-kun's way, you loser! Sakura shouted, backing up her crush, as some of the genin shot her a confused look. Hey, ugly, why don't we just make them? Sai said, getting hit on the head from Sakura from using his nickname for her. HMPH, actually not a bad idea, Sasuke said as he rushed towards the chunin in an attempt to take him down. But as he neared them, the same boy from earlier with the green bodysuit stopped him, to his shock. But as he did, the girl from before hit him on the head. You idiot! Wasn't it your idea that we act like we're weak in the exam? Tenten shouted, annoyed at the hypocritical actions of her teammate. Ah, I'm sorry Tenten. But I just couldn't help myself, Lee said, apologizing profusely. I agree, it was idiotic to ruin the plan like that, Lee. A boy with pale, pupil-less eyes said. He had long black hair and wore a khaki shirt and dark brown shorts. His right arm was wrapped in bandages as well as his right leg. Again, I'm sorry Neji. I just got caught up in the heat of the moment. Lee apologized to the boy now known as Neji. But after he did, he turned to Sakura, who instantly got creeped out. My name is Rock Lee, and you must be Sakura. Sakura, please go out with me. I'll protect you with my life, Lee said, flashing a blinding smile at her. No way, you're lame, Sakura said in a flat tone, as Lee looked defeated. Turning to Sasuke, Neji called out to him. Hey you, what's your name? He said in a slightly smug tone, which the young Uchiha took notice of. HMPH, when you want to learn someone's name, you should tell them your own first, he replied, as he started walking away. You're a rookie, aren't you? How long have you been a genin? Neji asked once more. The smug look on his face grew small bit more. Tisk, I don't have to answer you, he replied, as he walked away, Sai and Sakura following behind him. Damn, he looks strong. Who knew there were such monsters here? Sasuke though, cursing the fact that he still hasn't unlocked his Sharingan. Yufufu, he's kind of cute, Tenten thought, giggling slightly while she looked at the retreating form of the Uchiha. But as they were about to leave, Lee told them that there was something that he wanted to check out. Once all the genin left the area, the two chunin from before released their henge. In their places were Kotetsu and Izumo. Well, looks like they passed the first obstacle, didn't they? Kotetsu said in a jovial tone as Izumo nodded. Things sure are going to be interesting, aren't they? Izumo questioned, which his partner nodded as they went back to report their findings. Watching the other genin leave, Team 12 hadn't made their way up the stairs, opting to watch the strange boy known as Rock Lee follow Team 11. Naruto and Yakumo looked at Satsuki, and she sighed knowing what was probably going to happen. Yeah, let's make sure that my brother doesn't do something that he'll regret, she said as she led her team to where they had gone. Scene change. Shunan Exam Center. Open room. Team 11 found themselves in a spacious room as they headed towards the real examination hall. But as they were about to exit, they were stopped when a voice called out to them. Hey, you with the dark eyes. Lee shouted, dropping down to their level, surprising the group. Quote. You talking about me? Sasuke said, turning around and facing Lee. Yes, I want to fight you. Lee said, his eyes serious. My name is Rock Lee. It's commonplace to introduce yourself before someone tells you their name correct. He said, as Sasuke smirked. So you know, huh? My name is Sasuke Uchiha, of the Uchiha clan. A fight right now, you said. Sasuke said, then questioned Lee, to which the other nodded. I want to test my skills and techniques against someone from one of the genius clans of Konoha. And also, Lee trailed off as he once again stared at Sakura, then winked at her, much to her disgust. Ew. Those eyebrows. And that haircut. She screamed, and later became hysterical when Lee started blowing kisses at her, which she dodged with surprising skill. After the round of love comedy was over, Sasuke addressed Lee once more, his eyes darkening. You knew about my family and still want to fight me. You must be even dumber than you look. You're about to learn what this name is all about. Sasuke said, as he got into his Kenkan stance. As Lee put one arm behind his back and the other faced forward. Watching up in the balcony, Satsuki could only sigh at her brother's arrogance. She admitted that she used to have Sasuke's mindset about believing that her family was the strongest out there, but that changed after she made actual friends, and her family, namely her older brother and mother, broke her out of that mindset. Yakumo patted her best friend on the shoulder as she knew what was probably going through her mind, but Naruto was watching and analyzing Lee's stance. He saw that it was most likely built on speed and power, though it didn't appear to lack the defense that would normally come with such a stance. But before they were about to start, Sakura called out to Sasuke. Sasuke-kun, we only have 30 minutes until the exam starts. As if on cue, Sasuke rushed forward. This will only take 5. Once he said that, Lee acted, meeting Sasuke on the way to his surprise. But he quickly snapped out of it, seeing Lee about to attack. Konoha Senpu. He called out, spinning his body as he delivered a high kick which Sasuke ducked to avoid, but was hit when Lee rotated once again, delivering a low kick, breaking Sasuke's guard, sending him flying back. Sasuke-kun. Sakura cried out, not believing what she had just seen. Sai's eyes were also wide, not expecting such an attack from the strange boy. With Team 12, Yakumo and Satsuki were astonished by the attack. What just happened? Yakumo asked, trying to wrap her head around the attack as Satsuki, who had her Sharingan activated, copied the movements of the attack. That's fast, really fast. Even though I could see and copy him, I wouldn't be able to match up with his speed unless I went all out, and even then it would be close. She said as she narrowed her eyes, now not surprised why her brother got sent flying. That first kick. Once he throws that high kick, the evasion margin of his opponent is immediately restrained. Because of that, it augments the chances for that low kick to hit its mark. So that high kick is pretty much nothing more than a flashy feint. Naruto stated, stunning his teammates from how quickly he analyzed and broke down the attack. Back on the ground floor, Sasuke got back up, his eyes burning with fury. Once again, he rushed Lee, who this time launched him into the air with a quick upper kick to his chin. After doing so, he reappeared behind him using Kage Buyo as he loosened the bandages around his arms. But before anything could happen, Team 12 acted. Naruto dropped to the floor and exploded into a sprint before jumping at the two, to Lee and Sasuke's complete shock. Once at their level, he grabbed Sasuke and threw him to his sister, who caught him and set him down, Yakumo and herself checking him over with their Shosen Jutsu as Naruto grabbed a stunned Lee before he dropped to the ground. You know, if you followed through with that attack, he could have died. Naruto said, tightening his grip on the older boy's arm, causing him to wince a bit at the abnormal strength. How is he? Naruto asked his team, turning to face them. Finishing up scanning Sasuke, they stood up and made their way to the two. He'll be fine. Nothing major. A little bit of bruising, but it's nothing that needs immediate treatment. Yakumo reported, as she and Satsuki looked at Lee with cold gazes, making him gulp. You're lucky Naruto intervened when he did. If Sasuke had been seriously injured, you would have been in a hell of a lot of trouble. Satsuki said, her gaze growing even colder at the end of her sentence. Finally, Naruto let of his arm and started walking away with his team as the others looked on in awe. Wait. What is your name? Lee called out, desperate to know the name of the one who managed to break off his cage buyo. Stopping, the blonde turned around slightly and he froze when he met cold electric blue eyes. Naruto, was all he said before he left with his team. Scene change. Hallway outside meeting room. After the incident involving Sasuke and Lee, Team 12 made their way to the meeting room where the other genin who made it past the genjutsu trap were expected to be. Nodding to each other, they opened the door and were immediately met with a flood of combined killing intent from the other examinees. This was another tactic to weed out the weak. This allowed the competition to scope out and hunt down the weakest of the weak. But the team that was being subjected to the killing intent had experienced Zabazas, whose killing intent was at least 30 times greater than this. Shaking it off, they responded with their own killing intent, a distinct aura surrounding each member of the team. Satsuki had the aura of a blue hawk with crimson eyes. Yakumo had the aura that looked similar to the Ito that was sealed inside of her, being magenta with crimson eyes. Naruto's aura was the same black and crimson reptilian-like monster with burning crimson eyes from before. Having the combined force of their killing intent brushed off and feeling something 2 to 3 times as strong, the other genin trembled slightly in the face of the newcomers, giving them a wide berth when they made their way inside, eventually taking a spot in the corner of the room. After a few minutes, they heard the boisterous voice of Sakura and Ino cut through the room, and glancing over they saw that they were bickering once more over the boys that they liked. But as they turned away, the rest of the rookies immediately saw them and made their way over, Narumi leading the charge. Naru ni, she shouted as she lunged and latched herself to her older brother, who she hasn't seen in nearly 2 months. Where have you been? I haven't seen you around the village at all, it's been almost 2 months since I last saw you. She questioned her brother, giving her best puppy dog eyes that she could muster, making any lesser man give in, but Naruto was not such a man. I've been around Narumi-san, was all he said as tried to pry her off only for her to tighten her grip. He sighed, knowing that she wouldn't be letting go anytime soon. Unbeknownst to him and his sister, Yakumo and Satsuki were giving her spicy stares which left as soon as the other rookies arrived. Narumi, let go of Naruto Nichan. You know that he doesn't like you clinging to him like that. Mito half scolded half demanded. Once again Narumi had beaten her to the punch. She also desperately missed her brother after not seeing him for 2 months, and seeing Narumi cling to him like that made her blood boil with jealousy. As they started to squabble, a boy around their age jumped out of the crowd and threw a volley of kunai at them, Naruto shoving his sisters out of the way as he dodged. After he did, a strange mummified boy appeared in front of him, his hand already in half a ram seal as he swiped at him with a strange perforated gauntlet. Dodging, at first he didn't feel anything, but soon he dropped to one of his knees as his eyes widened slightly, his vision and ears blurring and ringing. Instantly, his team and sisters were by his side, checking to see if he was alright. As they were doing that, Naruto glared at the two who attacked him with slightly unfocused eyes as they started to slowly turn electric blue. But before anything else happened, a loud voice boomed throughout the room as the door slammed open. Ibiki and a group of Chunin proctors entering, dispersing around the room. Thanks for waiting. I'm Ibiki Morino, the exam proctor for the Chunin selection exam's first test. Oto Nin, stop doing what you want. Do you want to fail even before the exams begin? At that, the mummified boy from earlier apologized for his team's actions. I'm sorry, Mr. Proctor. This is our first exam, so we're a little jumpy, you know. He boy said, as he and his team gave the down blonde a smug smile before they turned around, never seeing Naruto narrow his eyes, his pupil go from round to draconian. I'll say this now so you morons had better not forget, there will be no tolerance for unsanctioned conflict. And even if they're sanctioned, killing your opponent will not be tolerated. Any of you pigs that break those rules will be eliminated immediately. He said in a chilling tone, making most of the genin start to sweat. For this first exam, you will be seated randomly by drawing lots. Now, come up here and start drawing. Ibiki ordered, as the genin lined up and started pulling out their numbers. After about 10 minutes, everyone was seated, Naruto seated next to the sound kunoichi that was a part of the team that attacked him earlier. Sitting down next to her, he gave her a soul-chilling glare that made her widen her eyes and stop breathing, fear invading every cell in her body from the inhumane glare that she was subjected to, but as soon as it came it vanished when he faced the front. Shakily, she did the same, praying that Dosu and Zaku could handle the demon that they had angered sitting next to her. Soon, the tests were handed out, and the room went silent as Ibiki addressed them once more. As you can see, this is the first portion of the exams and it's a written one. There will be no questions that will be answered during the course of the test. Furthermore, there will be a few rules that you will have to follow. Number 1. There will be a point-based system. You start with 10, there are 10 questions. You get a question wrong, you lose a point, easy right? Number 2. This will be a team-based test. You and your teammates will pass based on the total combined score of your team. You will compete to see which team can stay the closest to that total score of 30 points. Number 3. Anyone caught doing anything that even resembles cheating will have 2 points taken off for every offense. Those who lose all 10 points will be forced to leave. The Chunin stationed around the room will be observing and watching for anyone who tries to cheat, so be proud ninja and do your own work. And the final rule is, in the situation that you lose all 10 points, you and your team will be eliminated from the exam. At that last rule, an uproar occurred which Ibiki quelled quickly. Once everything was explained, Ibiki announced the beginning of the test. Now, the exam will last 1 hour. Now, you may begin. With that, silence and pencils on paper filled the room. As soon as the exam started, Naruto flipped over his exam and quickly scanned the test, his eyes stopping on the final question. Question 10. This question will be revealed 45 minutes after the test begins. Listen closely to the examiner before answering. What? Pushing his confusion to the back of his mind, he scanned the test once again and realized that most of these questions required a tremendous amount of theoretical and practical knowledge to answer. Quickly throwing a glance around, he noticed that some were already cheating. The bun-haired girl before attaching a mirror to one of the overhead lights with wires that were attached to her pencil. Shino was gathering information with his insects. Kiba was using Akamaru. The Hyuga were using their Byakugan. Shikamaru and Sakura were using their knowledge. Ino exchanged bodies between Shikamaru, Choji and herself to copy his answers. Mito and Narumi were answering using their own knowledge while Menma looked a little panicky. Sasuke and Sai were copying Sakura. Finally, Satsuki, Yakumo and Naruto were able to answer a majority of the questions since Anko pounded theoretical and practical knowledge into their heads. After half an hour, the 51 teams that came in was reduced to 39. Many were caught cheating and were eliminated. One team in particular was vocal about their elimination, to which a Chunin proctor had to put them down. Then another 15 minutes had passed, and once it did, Ibiki announced the start of the 10th question. Alright, now we begin the 10th question. Before we start, I'm going to go over a few added rules for this question. These are the rules of desperation, Ibiki said in an ominous tone, causing the tense atmosphere to become even more tense. Scene change. Jonin standby station. Gathered in the standby station, the sensei of the squads entered in the exam chatted amongst each other as to what they thought was going to happen and was happening so far. I just hope that those kids didn't get themselves eliminated already. Genma sighed, knowing that his squad was probably the one most likely to fail due to their horrible teamwork. It'll be alright, Genma, you gotta have a little confidence in them. Asuma said, taking a drag of his cigarette. If anything, they should be able to make it past the first exam and at least to the second, you know. They are part of the rookie 15 feet, you know. Asuma added in, trying to cheer his friend up. If the exams weren't hard enough, they have to deal with him in the first one. Genma added, making the other Jonin look to him with curious gazes. Who are you talking about, Genma? Kurenai asked, voicing the question in everyone's mind. They got to deal with Ibiki Morino in the first exam. At his answer, everyone sighed and prayed for the success of their genin. They're in for a rough time then. I really hope they'll be alright after dealing with that sadist. Kakashi said, as the others nodded their heads at his statement. After they did, they noticed that the last member of the room remained quiet, reading a magazine. And Anko-chan, are you worried about your genin? Kurenai asked her friend, still not having been forgiven for what happened a few weeks back. Quote. They'll pass, was all she said, her gaze never leaving the magazine, making the other occupants of the room a little sad from her indifference. The atmosphere a little awkward, they returned to talking about who was most likely to pass and who was not. Enko never leaving her magazine. Scene change. First exam testing room. Now, why don't we go over the rules concerning the 10th question? Number 1. You must choose whether or not you will answer it. At that, the blonde Suna Nin, Tamari, stood up. Wait, what if we choose not to answer it? She shouted, making everyone in the room tense up. If you choose not to take it, then you automatically lose all your points, making you and your teammates fail the exam. Now for the other rule, if you choose to take it, the lowest scoring member of your squad will be forced to remain a genin forever, while the other two who scored higher will advance to the next round. At that, the room exploded into an uproar. What? Then what's the point of a team exam? But what if we all have the same number of points? Can we decide with our teammates? At the voices shouting about how outrageous the conditions started to rise, Ibiki immediately quieted them down. Now, raise your hand if you are going to quit. Once the number is confirmed, you will be escorted out. Once those words left his mouth, the room became deathly quiet. The team members that had built up friendships with each other immediately narrowed their eyes at their teammates, self-preservation over their own success making them turn on them. Friendships and trust built up over the course of their careers as genin were immediately broken, spite and tension in its place. Seeing the reaction he wanted, Ibiki hid his smirk. After 3 minutes he was about to confirm that no one was going to give up the question, but slowly a hand rose to the complete shock of everyone present. Morino-san, I give up my right as well as my team's right to take the 10th question. At that, Yakumo and Satsuki could only stand up gape at their team leader's decision. They had this exam in the bag, they were able to answer pretty much all the questions without much difficulty, minus a few of the cryptograms. Naruto, what the hell are you doing? Satsuki shouted, her eyes widening in disbelief, not believing that he would take them down with him like that. You can't be serious, Naruto. Yakumo questioned him, her eyes wide, not thinking that the normally blank but confident blonde would do something like this to them. But he ignored them, his eyes staring straight into Ibiki's, and the man had to hide a smile at the brass that the kid had. Most if not all of these kids gave into the fact that they will be leaving one team member behind. Because of that they broke a very important rule of a ninja. This kid though, his thoughts were broken when another person raised her hand. Am I Mr. Proctor? I also would like to quit. Mito said, her voice shaking slightly when her sister and brother looked at her with wide eyes. After Naruto's decision to not take the test was heard, some of the other teams who were built on friendship remembered that they were a team. Casting apologetic and forgiving looks at each other, more and more of the genin raised their hands to signal them abandoning the 10th question. Out of the 39 teams that remained seated in the room, 26 had their hands raised. After 10 minutes, Ibiki finally nodded, and signaled the Chunin to split into 2 groups. One stayed in the room while the other followed. Ibiki followed out as he led the 26 teams out. Once out, he led them into a separate room before he made them line up with their teams. Once they did, he cracked a smile to their complete shock. Congratulations, you all passed the first exam. Once those words left his mouth, everyone dropped their jaws. I bet you're wondering why you passed when you forfeited the last question right. That question was a simulation of a scenario where you had to take a risk, that risk having 2 consequences. 1. You sacrifice one of your teammates for your own personal gain, or 2. You give up and retreat with the lives of everyone. Because in times, information is more important than life, and on missions and on the battlefield, people risk their lives to get their hands on it. But even with that being said, you should never give up the life of any of your comrades in order to further your own gain. It seems like one of you noticed that rather quickly. Finishing his last sentence, he looked directly at Naruto and was met with the same blank look from before. The other genin looking in awe at him, Yakumo and Satsuki looking at him with apologetic eyes. The ability to be courageous and survive any hardship. These are the abilities needed to become a Chunin captain. Those who can't put their destinies on the line, who cling to the notion of furthering their own gain while leaving their comrades to perish alone, those pieces of trash who can only make such cowardly choices do not deserve to become Chunin. Finishing his speech, Ibiki gave them a larger smile, proud of their decision to not abandon their teammates. Now, the 78 of you. Once again, congratulations on passing the first exam. Once he finished, the window exploded as a giant sword embedded itself into the beam on the wall. The hostile moment was broken when Ibiki sighed as Zabuza appeared in a swirl of mist, on the handle of his sword. All right, you brats, I'm Zabuza Momochi, the proctor for the second exam. Zabuza barked out. Seeing the looks of fear on their faces, they all knew that he was the demon of the hidden mist. Whoa, there's a bunch of them who passed Ibiki. You must be losing that skill you told me about. I expected you to only pass around 20. Zabuza commented, as Ibiki's eye twitched slightly. But before he could retort, Zabuza pulled out Kubikiribocho and rested it on his shoulder. Well, whatever. Follow me. We're heading to training ground 44. Don't get left behind or else I'll fail you. I have no patience for brats who can't follow simple orders. With that, Zabuza walked out the door, leaving behind a stunned group of genin. As the rest of them were stunned, Naruto walked forward while he patted Yakumo and Satsuki on the back, snapping them out of their stupor as they followed him out the door. Soon, the rest of the genin followed suit. Scene change. Training ground 44. Arriving at the heavily fenced area, the genin stood in front of Zabuza and a group Chunin as they started to address them. Now, welcome to training ground 44, better known as the Forest of Death. This is where the second part of the Chunin exams will take place. In this part, you will have to fight and survive for 5 days while trying to reach the tower in the center of the forest. But reaching the tower isn't all you have to do. You will each need to find and secure a pair of these scrolls. Zabuza started, as he pulled out 2 scrolls labeled with Heaven and Earth, and showed them to the genin. But before he could continue, some of the genin voiced their concerns. Wait, 5 days. What about a shower? What do we eat? What about a place to sleep? Sighing at the idiotic questions that he was getting, Zabuza continued. Didn't you hear? You have to survive in this forest. There's plenty of wild game and edible plants that you can eat. There are multiple rivers and streams that you can get water from and bathe in if you want. But adding to that, there's also some nasty predatory animals and poisonous flora in this forest, so try not to get eaten by a flower, alright? At that, they quieted down and he finished with his explanation. Each team will be given 1 scroll of these scrolls at random to start out with, 13 the Heaven, and 13 the Earth. You will need to protect that scroll with your lives, and at the same time fight for the other. To pass, you need to get both to the tower with your entire team intact within the time limit. Now, let me explain what will constitute a failing. Failure to make it to the tower with your team and scroll will fail your team. Having a teammate die or get killed will also get you failed. And that's the other thing. You will be in this forest for 5 days, once inside you aren't leaving until the time limit runs out. And the final rule, opening the scroll will also cause you to automatically fail no matter what. At that, everyone froze. Seeing their expressions, Zabuza couldn't help but grin under his bandages. Now, fill out these forms. They're waivers and information concerning yourself. You need to hand in 3 to get a scroll, and be sure to hide it well. Don't know who might be watching, you know. After that, head to a gate and wait until everything is set. And one last piece of advice, try not to die. Finished with his explanation, Zabuza signaled the Chunin to start distributing the forms around. After getting their forms, Team 12 made their way over to a small rock formation and began filling out their forms. While quiet, their minds were racing. Finally, Yakumo and Satsuki spoke up. Hey, Naruto, I'm sorry about earlier, during the first exam. I should have known better than to question your judgment without hearing your reasoning. We're a team after all, and we should always trust each other and stick together. Satsuki apologized, feeling guilty about calling out her teammate in front of the entire room. I'm also sorry, Naruto. You're our team's leader, and we should always have faith in you. I was just scared and nervous, but that still doesn't make what I did any better. Yakumo also apologized, knowing what she did wasn't right. It's fine, you two. You only did what you thought was right. I don't hold it against you. Naruto replied, making the hearts of his teammates feel lighter than before, their guilt melting away. Now, for this exam there will be killing allowed. I don't want the two of you doing anything risky, understand? Now serious, Naruto started to address his team, making them turn serious as well. We'll need to find a team to take down and take a scroll from. Not only that, but we need to protect our own as well. And adding on to that, we need to avoid not only other teams but the animals and plants that are inside. The plan is to stay in Formation D. You two will be in the rear this time, so keep close and don't let each other out of your sight. I'll take point and keep a lookout for anything in front of us, and in the event that we do engage a team, I'll make them break formation while you guys pick them off when they're separated. In the events that things go south, you two retreat and I'll take them off your trail. We'll meet up somewhere else. At his plan, Satsuki and Yakumo nodded. Though they didn't like the last part, they knew that he was probably strong enough to take on a team of genin alone. Finishing up with signing their forms, they made their way to the tent where they would receive their scrolls. Along the way, they were stopped by Zabuza. Haha. Well brats, trying to become Shunin huh? Zabuza said in a jovial tone, as he greeted them. Giving him a smile, they had a quick conversation to the shock of everyone present. We are Zabuza-san, we'll pass this part without any trouble at all. Yakumo said with determination in her eyes. Zabuza giving her a pat on the head for her determination, much to her embarrassment. After we pass, you had better stop treating us like kids. Satsuki said, a smirk on her face, but it quickly left when Zabuza also gave her a pat on the head, her face getting red with embarrassment and anger. Quote. Zabuza and Naruto stared at each other for a while before they smiled, Zabuza putting his hand on his shoulder. Don't you die in there, brat, we still haven't decided on who's the better swordsman. Zabuza proclaimed, making the other genin tense up. If Zabuza Momochi had acknowledged him as a swordsman, they were sure that he was powerful as well. Bidding farewell to their superior and friend, they got their scroll and followed their assigned proctor to their gate. Finally, a buzzer sounded out and they immediately rushed into the forest. Scene change. Forest of Death. Team 12's location. Once they stepped into the forest, Team 12 sped through the foliage in formation, getting as far away from the gate as possible. Soon, they managed to find a small stream and decided to stop for the moment. Alright, status report, Naruto asked, as Yakumo started her assessment. So far, we're about 50 meters from out starting position. I didn't sense anything get caught in my Kyudo Kibaku and I didn't sense any genjutsu cast on any of us. I'm sure that for right now, we're safe. Yakumo reported, panting a little from having to maintain her jutsu since the start of the exam. I've seen the same. My Sharingan didn't pick up any movement in the area, and I didn't see any chakra in the surroundings either. Satsuki gave her assessment, her crimson eyes returning to Onyx. Alright, thanks you two. We'll take a break for now and regain our energy. Yakumo, take it easy for right now, out of all of us you've used up the most chakra so far, so try and recover as much as you can. Satsuki, you keep an eye on things while I go and find us something to eat. When I come back, remember what we talked about, alright? Naruto ordered, getting affirmative nods from his teammates as he headed deeper into the forest. Once Naruto left, Yakumo let out a sigh as she took a seat on a rock as Satsuki fetched some water and made a small fire, boiling it. A comfortable silence took over as they relaxed but kept their senses alert. Yakumo, what do you think of the exams so far? Satsuki asked, putting more fuel into the small fire. So far, I think that we're doing great. We haven't run into any enemy ninja or animals. Overall, I feel pretty confident about our situation so far. Yakumo said with a smile on her face, her best friend returning one. After 10 minutes, they heard rustling in the brush nearby. Quickly standing up, Yakumo and Satsuki pulled out a kunai while they took up defensive stances. But their tenseness left when they saw the familiar blank face of their teammate. Sorry, but I didn't find anything, ladies. Naruto said, but was instantly sent flying by a punch from Satsuki. What the hell? Naruto shouted, his eyes wide in disbelief. But they widened even more when Yakumo fired off a volley of shuriken and kunai at him, forcing him to dodge. Once he was a safe distance away, he was met with a glare from both of the girls in front of him. You must think we're morons or something, huh? Satsuki said, pulling out another kunai as she activated her Sharingan. Naruto doesn't call us ladies. and he wouldn't have shouted from a weak punch like that. Yakumo added, a handful of shuriken ready as she glared at the imposter. Tisk. Looks like it failed, huh? Well, whatever. I'm taking that scroll. The imposter said before a puff of smoke appeared, a boy wearing a white bodysuit, a respirator on his face sprinting out of it. Quickly, Yakumo threw her shuriken while Satsuki sped through a series of seals. Seeing the danger in front on him, the boy dodged rolled to the side to evade the hail of shuriken but instantly widened his eyes when he heard Satsuki. Sweden. Sushushiki. Satsuki shouted as she fired a large ball of water that crashed into him, sending him crashing to the trunk of the tree behind him. After a few seconds, she released the jutsu as the boy hit the ground unconscious. After they dispatched their opponent, he disappeared in a puff of smoke, a log in his place. As they started to calm down from the rush of adrenaline, it came back when the brush rustled once more, another Naruto stepping out covered in a little bit of blood, carrying a small boar over his shoulder. Immediately seeing the tenseness of his team, he stopped walking towards him and scanned the area, noticing the shuriken lodged in the tree to his right, a pool of water with a log laying in it. Quote. So you were attacked, Naruto said, his eyes growing colder, making his teammates shiver slightly, but it also reassured them that it indeed was their teammate. Getting debriefed about what happened while he was gone, Naruto nodded, cursing himself for letting his guard down. Even though Satsuki and Yakumo stated that it wasn't his fault, he couldn't help but feel like it was, being that he was the one who they all agreed was their squad's leader. Finishing cooking the boar, he told them that he would keep watch for the night as they ate, still angry at his own incompetence for costing his teammates valuable energy. At first they protested, but were immediately quieted when Naruto gave them a stern look. Quietly, they pulled out their sleeping bags and went to bed. Naruto pulling out a kunai and started spinning it as he closed his eyes, letting his other senses take over in the darkness that now consumed the forest. Time skip. The next morning. Waking up, Yakumo and Satsuki immediately sat up and frantically looked for their blonde teammate. They found him shirtless, washing his upper body with a damp towel. Unable to break away from the tantalizing sight, the two just stared as they wiped away the tiny bit of drool that dribbled down their lips from the stimulating scene. But they were broken out of their state when Naruto suddenly stood up, pulling out a kunai before he was blown away from his position by a sudden surge of wind, making the two widen their eyes. Quickly shedding their sleeping bags, they were greeted with the sight of a tall, gaunt man with a single violet-colored rectangular mark on his forehead, his bangs on his left side. He wore a black bodysuit with various straps that covered it, a cloak hanging on his right shoulder. Well, what do we have here, him? Looks like that blonde brat wasn't strong at all. Well, what about the two of you, him? He asked in a condescending tone, making the two girls narrow their eyes at him. Oh, scary. It's like facing a pair of agitated kittens. He jeered, finally breaking the last of the girls' patience. You'll pay for what you did to Naruto. Satsuki shouted angrily, her Sharingan flaring to life as she pulled out a wakizashi with the Uchiha insignia as the Tsuba, the handle wrapped in a cloth of red and white colors of her clan. You're going to regret attacking us, Yakumo said in a cold voice, pulling out Tonto with her clan's symbol running along the length of the blade, its handle wrapped in a pink and magenta cloth. Oh, looks like these kittens have some claws, huh? Well, let's see how sharp they are, he said in an arrogant tone, dropping down before he pulled out a kunai. Silence covered the newly made battle zone before Yakumo and Satsuki charged forward, their blades intent on running through the man before them. But they were shocked when he blocked both of their strikes with his kunai. How disappointing. They're duller than I expected, the man said in a mockingly disappointed tone. Snapping out of their shock, the two continued their assault, attack in surprising sync with each other to his surprise. Jumping back, he was met with Yakumo, who lunged forward with a low stab intent to pierce his leg, which he pulled back behind himself in response. As he did, Satsuki appeared, her hand on Yakumo's back to support her as she swiped horizontally at his neck, intent on beheading him. His eyes widened when he found himself unable to take step back, quickly glancing down, his legs were intertwined with each other. The leg he took a step back with from earlier blocked his dominant leg from taking a step back. Cursing at his error, he dropped to the ground and rolled backwards, Satsuki missing her attack as she hopped off of Yakumo's back. Standing back up, He tried to take a step back but instead he tilted his head to the left to his surprise and horror. Wondering why he made such an erroneous mistake, he saw that Yakumo had one of her hands in a seal and his eyes immediately widened. So you saw her. Looks like my Heki Ranshinsho worked then. Yakumo said with a cold smirk appearing on her face as Satsuki gained a similar look, her Sharingan spinning ominously. Seeing the now cold and confident looks on the two girls, Ichi started to sweat, not expecting the girls to be this strong. The information said that the boy was much stronger than they were, but if they were this strong he couldn't imagine how strong that boy was. He was broken out of his thoughts when the two charged at him, their eyes cold and narrowed as he panicked. You're finished. They shouted in unison, stabbing him in the chest with their blades as he let out a silent scream. Scene change. Forest of Death. Naruto's location. After he was blown away, Naruto lost consciousness for a few minutes before he came to and scanned his surroundings. Immediately he jumped back as a volley of kunai impaled the spot that he stood on. Looking at the source of the attack, he spotted a curvaceous woman with two purple rectangular markings on her left cheek, a red-violet bodysuit that revealed much of her chest and figure, and long brown hair curled into a spiral. Upon spotting her, she giggled at him before dropping down to meet him. Oh, well, aren't you a cutie? She said in a seductive tone, matched with a small smile on her lips. Who are you? You definitely aren't a genin. Naruto asked in a chilling tone, his eyes becoming colder than ice. Oh, scary, though you would be much more terrifying and less tempting if you had a shirt on, boy. She replied, scanning his body with her eyes. Before she finished though, Naruto was in front of her, his fist back. Her eyes widened in shock before she let out a soundless scream as he buried his fist into her abdomen, sending her crashing to the tree behind, dust exploding from the impact. Tisk, weak, Naruto said, spitting out the word like it was poison. As the dust cleared, in her place was a shattered log. How very scary. What would you do if that had actually hit me? She said in a hurt tone with a pout on her face before it turned into a scary sneer. I'll make you wish you were dead when I'm done with you, boy. She shouted as she charged at him with incredible speed, engaging him in a taijutsu battle. Lashing out, her palm connected to his chest as he reeled back, wincing in pain. Following up with a devastating elbow to his jaw, Naruto tried to take a step back but was met with a kick to his abdomen, sending him back a few feet. Looks like you aren't as strong as you think you were, huh? She said in a sing-song tone as she made her way towards him. But as she was about to reach him, the ground underneath her exploded, Naruto landing a vicious uppercut on her chin, sending her up in the air before he spun around and kicked the side of her body, sending her flying sideways, the Naruto on the ground replaced with a log. Landing on his feet, he spat out a globule of blood before taking his stance again. His opponent was already walking towards him while dusting off her clothes, which were now ripped in a few places from hitting and skipping on the ground. Look what you did. You ruined my favorite outfit. Or maybe, were you trying to rip it? Hee hee, you're such a perverted boy, but I guess that does mean you're healthy. She said in a teasing tone before she vanished, making Naruto's eyes go wide before he was sent flying through the forest from a kick to the chest. Finally, he crashed into a river and surfaced, catching his breath from the brutal attack. Getting out of the water and kneeling on it, he tried to analyze his opponent's attacks. They were too strong to be just physical strength, and her speed and durability, it wasn't human. Before he could continue along that train of thought, she appeared in a blur and taunted him. What's the matter, cutie? Can't you keep up with little old me? She said in a cutesy tone, making which was starting to infuriate Naruto. Seeing his rising agitation, she decided to rouse his anger even more. If you're having this much trouble with me, I can't only imagine how those two girls are holding out against Ichi. At that, Naruto's eyes widened, as she gained a cruel smile. But before she could continue, she avoided a slash that would have bisected her. Jumping back, her eyes widened when she saw what he was wielding. It wasn't the great sword that the reports said, it was a large, pitch-black scythe. It had a black blade and shaft with the joint connecting the two having the kanji for void inscribed in crimson onto it. Spinning it around a few times, he held it in a reverse grip behind his body as Ni stared in awe, fear starting to seep into her heart from seeing such a weapon. But she had to move as he appeared right next to her already in mid-swing. Rolling to the side, she suffered a cut on her side from the attack. Rolling back up, she jumped back to avoid another horizontal swipe and he carried out his assault. After the short game of cat and mouse, Ni had suffered multiple cuts, the deepest being the diagonal slash on her chest, between her. Naruto didn't look damaged, but he was suffering internally from her attacks from earlier. About to charge in for another flurry of slashes, Naruto stopped when he felt a large explosion nearby as Ni smirked. Looks like those girls are finished, boy. Too bad you weren't there to save them. She sneered, the last of her energy running out. But she quieted and felt fear take over her heart when he turned to face her. After hearing her taunting, Naruto felt rage boil in his veins. Glaring at her, his navy blue eyes were replaced with burning crimson, his round pupil now reptilian. Getting into a stance with his scythe behind him, he called out the name of his technique. Ekuripusu Seizu. Tasuki Ketatamashi. Naruto whispered before he vanished and reappeared in front of Ni, as she could only watch on in horror and shock as he swung diagonally vertically and cut of her right arm, followed by spinning his scythe then removing her left leg, then he spun around and cut her in half at the waist, stopping and spinning his scythe once more he cut her head off. As she died, Ni had one last run through her head as a smile found its way to her severed head. Hirako-sama. He is the one. She though before Naruto ended her. Finishing his assault, Naruto followed through with the last swing and slashed vertically once more, splitting her head and severed body in two as they fell to the ground. Casting one last burning gaze at his dismembered opponent, Naruto's eyes returned to their normal navy before he sealed away his scythe and rushed to his teammate's aid, never seeing the remains of his opponent dissolve into a pool of strange black substance. Scene change. Forest of Death. Yakumo and Satsuki vs. Ichi. Yakumo and Satsuki were confused and scared. After they stabbed the man in front of them, he blew up and sent them flying. Once they recovered, they saw that he didn't even have a scratch on him. Narrowing their eyes, they sped through a series of seals before calling out their jutsu. Sweden. Teppadama. Satsuki shouted, firing off a volley of high-speed water bullets. Sweden. Mizoripa. Yakumo called out, firing a fast jet of water. Once their jutsu hit their mark, a large explosion of water and earth covered the area where their opponent once stood. Smirking to themselves, they quickly panicked and lost it when they saw that he wasn't harmed in the slightest. Phew, that was pretty scary, you know. I could have actually died, you know. He said in a mocking tone, making the two girls in front of him lose the confidence that they had built up. What are you? Satsuki asked, not believing that anyone could take an attack like that and still be okay. But all she got was a scary smile as he vanished, appearing right next to them. Wah, was all Yakumo managed to say before she was sent flying by a kick, crashing into the river. Yakumo! Satsuki shouted, not believing what just happened. But she quickly was sent flying when he backhanded her to the same area that he sent Yakumo. After hitting the water, the two girls could only writhe in pain from the power the blows had, finally resurfacing after a minute of regaining their composure. Standing up on the water, they found their opponent was standing on the river with them, a sneer on his face. You two should give up. Your blonde boyfriend is probably 6 feet under by now, especially since Ni is fighting him. I wouldn't be surprised if she kissed him before she killed him actually. Not a bad way to go, wouldn't you? He never finished his sentence as Yakumo appeared in front of him and buried her fist into his abdomen, making his eyes widen as the air was forced out of his lungs. He didn't have a chance to recover as Satsuki appeared behind Yakumo, the two exchanging places as Satsuki delivered a bone-shattering upper kick sending him into the air. Jumping back, the two blurred through a series of seal for their most powerful jutsu. As he began to fall back down, they finished and ended the battle. Sweden. Daibakufu no jutsu. They shouted in unison, the water from the river forming a circle around the two as two spiraling waterfalls collided with the falling form of their opponent, shredding the ground, uprooting the trees, and battering his body against the ground, as he was subjected to an unrelenting assault of blunt force trauma. Finally, the water receded, Satsuki and Yakumo dropping onto their knees panting, having used an extreme amount of chakra for their jutsu. Seeing the damage that their jutsu caused, there was no doubt that they finished off their opponent. As that thought rang through their minds, they felt sick to their stomachs, but it vanished when they saw a head of blonde hair emerge from the forest. Yakumo. Satsuki. He shouted, as he sprinted towards them. Their hearts were immediately relieved when they saw that he was okay, but then they noticed that there were dark blue, bordering black, bruises that covered his body, indicating severe internal trauma. As he reached them, he bent down to help them up, offering the two of them his shoulders, which they gratefully accepted. Making it towards the shore, they finally sat down, the adrenaline from their battle finally fading from their bloodstream. But as they were relaxing after their grueling battle, they never noticed that their opponent didn't perish from the relentless assault. Ichi, after seeing Satsuki's Sharingan, knew that was the one his master wanted. After confirming it, he sent a snake-like creature from his arm towards the group, intent on fulfilling the mission he was given. Naruto, sensing something was wrong, immediately shoved Satsuki aside, causing her and Yakumo to turn and begin to shout at him, but their words died in their mouths when a snake-like creature bit him near his neck. Pain. That was all that Naruto could feel the moment he was bitten by the snake. Gritting his teeth in a futile attempt to stifle his cry of pain, he grabbed at the area where he had been bit as he eventually gave in, letting out an agonizing scream of pain, the likes of which his teammates have never heard before. Quickly ending the snake with a hail of shuriken and kunai, the two were at the side of their downed teammate. What they saw made their eyes widen. There was a strange mark on his shoulder that was in the shape of 3 tomo. As tears started to form in their eyes, they heard maniacal laughing from the direction that their opponent had been sent, and they saw him, his arms, legs, and neck bent in distorted directions. They finished him off, each with a kunai embedding itself in his head. As he died, a final through rang through his head. Hirako-sama. He is the one you have been searching for. Ichi said in his mind, as he finally died. After everything was settled, with a now unconscious Naruto in their arms, Yakumo and Satsuki could only shake at what just happened. Their leader was injured, unconscious, and now had a strange-looking mark on him because they let their guard down. Before they could fall further into depression, they heard a scream echo through the forest and instantly tensed up. Locking gazes with each other, the two nodded, wiping away the rest of their tears. They steeled their resolve, putting Naruto on their shoulders and making their way to a safer place, never seeing that Ichi's body dissolved into another puddle of black substance. Scene change. Unknown location. Looks like duplicates failed. I didn't get the Sharingan, but it appears that I gained something even more valuable. A voice said calmly, before eerie laughter could be heard echoing in the blackness. After the grueling battle that took place a few hours earlier, Yakumo and Satsuki carried Naruto to a hollowed-out tree which they turned into their temporary base. After checking over his vitals, they soon learned that his chakra was fluctuating wildly. Not knowing what to do since they never experienced something like this, they could only make him comfortable and put a cool towel on his forehead to calm the fever that he started to develop. Exhausted and still recovering from their battle, Yakumo and Satsuki took shifts between sleeping and watching over Naruto and the area for any enemies. Even between the shifts of watching and sleeping, both had dark bags under their eyes. At the moment Satsuki was resting while Yakumo was on watch duty, her tanto held tightly in her hand, fatigue and hunger at her senses. Shaking her head to remove the feelings that she felt, finishing to do so, she froze as she heard a slight rustling coming from the bush. Narrowing her eyes, she threw a kunai at the source of the noise as a squirrel left the bush. Sighing at her jumpiness, she was about to relax when she saw the squirrel blew up, an explosive tag attached to its back. Widening her eyes, she quickly shook Satsuki awake, who grumpily demanded to know why she was woken up prematurely. But the look on her best friend's face immediately made her snap awake. Satsuki. We're surrounded. Yakumo whispered, a bead of sweat dropping down her face as Satsuki widened her eyes. How many? Satsuki asked, pulling out her wakizashi and activating her Sharingan as she scanned the area, her own eyes widening, seeing that there was minute movement without a breeze present. 9 people. Yakumo whispered as Satsuki tightened her grip on her wakizashi. The unnatural silence was broken when the 9 people that Yakumo sensed dropped into the clearing. 3 were the Odo Nin from earlier in the exam, 2 were with the Ama Nin from before, the final 3 were Kusa Nin they didn't recognize. Well, what do we have here? 2 girls all by themselves. One of the Kusa Nin sneered. Narrowing their eyes, Yakumo and Satsuki stood up despite the aching in their bodies. Oh, looks like they're still able to fight. Well, I'll pay you bitches back for earlier. The Aim Nin said, pulling out a kunai. Silence reigned over the clearing before both sides charged, the Odo Nin hanging back. Yakumo took on the group of AIM Nin, dodging as best as her body could, getting cut up in the process. Dodging another slash from one of her opponents, she kicked him in the side, sending him flying off to the side as his teammates attacked with more ferocity, managing to stab her in the shoulder as she stifled a cry of pain. Sidestepping and blocking a slash from another one of the AIM Nin, she spun and smashed her elbow on the side of his head, sending him to the ground. The same AIM Nin from the beginning of the exam was the last one standing. One of his teammates were unconscious while the other was struggling to stand up, clutching his side in agony. Losing his focus from looking at his teammate, Yakumo lunged with her tanto, stabbing him in the shoulder as he cried out in pain, but his cry was cut short when she ripped it out, then spun it around, smashing the pommel against his temple, sending him to the ground unconscious. With Satsuki, the Kusa Nin landed some lucky blows against her, but she retaliated with twice the power. The taller of the ninja quickly fell when she smashed her elbow against his chest and grabbed him by the hair, spinning and making his teammate stab him in the side as she kicked him away to the same person who stabbed him. She was met with the shortest of the three who engaged her in taijutsu, kicking her in the side as she punched him in the side of the head as he reeled back. Not letting up her assault, she took a quick step forward before jumping and smashing her knee into his face, sending him to the ground. She finished him off by stomping on the side of his head. After dealing with the second of the group, she was stabbed in the side by the last of the three. Her eyes wide, she let out a roar before turning around and hitting him in the temple as he dropped to his knees. Not finished, she ripped out the dagger that he used to stab her and returned the favor by embedding it into his shoulder, making him cry out in pain, which was cut short when she smashed his temple once more with the pommel of her wakizashi. The two girls were both wounded and exhausted now, panting. They heard clapping and turned their attention to its source. Wow, that's pretty impressive. You each managed to defeat a whole team by yourselves. A boy with spiky, dark hair and dark eyes mockingly praised them as he clapped. Seeing that they still had opponents, the two looked at each other and saw that they were in pretty bad shape. Nodding their heads, they took a breath before they calmed themselves, opening their eyes and locking gazes with the Odo Nin once again. Which one do you want, Dosu? Zaku said, wearing a nasty sneer on his face as he settled into a taijutsu stance. It doesn't matter, they'll both be dead either way, Dosu said, holding his melody arm in front of him. Behind them, their female teammate just grimaced. Hearing her teammates, she knew that the two other girls were in for a painful experience. Dosu and Zaku went on the offensive, moving with speed that shocked Yakumo and Satsuki, when in reality they were too exhausted and injured to perceive the accurate speed that they were moving with. Zaku met Yakumo first, making her cry in pain as he punched her in the cheek before moving closer and punching her in the side as she stumbled back. Regaining her footing, she lashed out with a quick punch that Zaku barely dodged, grazing his cheek, to his surprise. Taking advantage of his shock, she took a step forward, spun around with her elbow that was blocked to her horror. Not letting up, he kicked her in the side, sending her to the ground. He wasn't done as he kicked her in the side, making her cry out in more pain. Nearby, Dosu used his melody arm to disorient Satsuki before he delivered a backhand that sent her to the ground. Rolling back to her feet, she spun around and managed to land a kick on Dosu, but he blocked it, making her eyes widen. Grabbing her leg, he kicked out the other one from underneath her. Once she hit the ground, Dosu was on her, kicking her in the same place that she was stabbed before, making her scream in pain. Seeing the brutal way that her teammates were fighting, or rather torturing, the two girls, Kin could only ball her fists up and close her eyes, trying to drown out the pain screams that she heard. After a few minutes, Dosu and Zaku were standing above a bloody Yakumo and Satsuki. The wounds that they had from earlier were opened and oozing fresh blood as they struggled to take in air, their ribs either fractured or broken by the beatdown they received. Well, that takes care of that, doesn't it, Dosu? Zaku said in a condescending tone, as Dosu laughed darkly. Well, they're of no use. Get rid of them. Start with the Uchiha. Dosu said, pointing at Satsuki as Yakumo widened one of her swollen eyes. No. Not saw Satsuki. She whimpered pitifully, as she tried to move despite the agonizing pain that exploded throughout her body. But it was useless as Zaku grabbed Satsuki by the hair and pulled out her own tanto, making Yakumo panic even more. Well, any last words before your friend goes? Zaku sneered, as Yakumo struggled to get up. No. Satsuki. Yakumo screamed as the blade of her tanto drew closer to her best friend's neck. Scene change. Inside Naruto's mind. Since he was bitten, Naruto was just floating around his consciousness, feeling numb in mind and body. He didn't remember anything, he didn't know why he was here or what he was doing, he was just here. But after what felt like an eternity, he heard a voice in the blackness. He. Boy, do you desire power? The voice said in an eerie tone. Power. I need power. Naruto blankly answered, never noticing that the moment his answered, the curse seal started to spread. That's it, boy. Accept the gift that I bestowed upon you. Use that power all you like. The voice replied, as the curse seal nearly covered his entire body. Just as Naruto was about to be devoured by the curse seal, it slowly making its way to finish covering his eye, a light shone in the blackness. Naruto, have you completely lost your mind? A familiar voice called out, making Naruto's eyes widen. As he frantically searched for the source of the voice, desperately trying to remember why he was doing so. Soon, he saw a small ball of light start to grow in size. Widening his eyes, he watched as the ball of light turned into a person who he felt that he knew, who he felt was someone important to him for some reason though he couldn't see his face. Looks like you don't remember me, huh, Naruto? He said in a slightly sad tone. Naruto. Is that me? Naruto questioned, feeling something in his chest thump at the name. After staring at him for a while, he saw the black-haired man look around and whistle, seeing where they were. Looks like you're in some trouble here, huh? Being lost in all this darkness, being lost in your own heart, being lost in your own soul. He said, making Naruto's eyes widen. I'm lost, he asked, to which the man smiled. He reached out and put his hand on top of Naruto's head. It's all right, Naruto. Just try to remember slowly, all right? He said as Naruto felt a pang shoot through his head. I don't remember you, Naruto said in a sad tone, seeing a sad smile appear on the man's face. It's all right, Naruto. No matter what, I'll always be here for you, Naruto. Even if I'm not here physically, I'll always be with you in your heart as long as you don't forget about me. He said. At that sentence, Naruto froze, his mind started racing and he felt a fire ignite in his soul. Soon, memories of him and a black-haired man started to flash through his mind. Soon, the blackness that invaded his mind vanished as an explosion of light blinded all. Once the light subsided, the endless black was replaced with a clearing, a large pond in front of it. Opening his eyes, Naruto's blank navy were replaced with electric blue filled with determination. The curse seal stopped spreading across his body as the man from before placed his hand on the place where he was bitten. I'll help you out this time, Naruto. He said in a happy tone, as light started to emit from his palm as the curse seal started to shift. The three tomo-shaped marks got a gold ring circling it. After it was done, Naruto turned around and smiled at the man, before crashing into him with a hug. Ryu Nichan. He whimpered, tears slowly giving way as he felt his older brother ruffle his hair softly. You've grown up so much, Naruto. I wish we could talk more, but you need to help them out. He said, as Naruto's eyes widened before he slowly nodded. Giving one last glance and smile to his older brother, Naruto vanished, leaving Ryuhei alone in his mind. The jovial and happy expression on his face vanished as soon as Naruto left, Ryuhei turning to the corner of his mind and started walking there. Reaching out, he grabbed a pale, bandaged child by the throat as they stared at him in terror and shock. I don't know who you are, but I'll let you know one thing. He said, tightening his grip on their throat, as they desperately grabbed at the hand that was crushing their throat. I will not stand by idly as some freak tries to take over my little brother's mind. I'll give you this one warning. Ryuhei finished, snapping the child's neck as they hung limply in his grip. Soon, black and crimson flames erupted from his hands and consumed the body, Ryuhei's electric blue eyes replaced with burning crimson. Scene change. Forest of Death. Naruto vs. Oto Nin. Everyone in the vicinity froze when they felt a terrifying and bloodthirsty presence behind them. Craning their necks, they froze at what they saw. Naruto was standing up hunched over, his head bowed with his bangs obscuring his eyes. But slowly he raised his head and what they saw would haunt their nightmares. His eyes were burning crimson with a reptilian pupil, filled with such anger and bloodlust that Zaku dropped Yakumo's tanto and took a step back, Dosu doing the same when he saw those demonic eyes. But those weren't the only major changes about him. Near the mark, a strange flame-like pattern had spread across his body, taking over half of his face. The aura that exploded and spiraled around him like a vortex of flames consisted of black, purple, crimson, and navy blue-colored chakra. Letting out an animalistic growl, he took a step forward as the Oto Nin backed up. Before anyone could do anything, before they could blink, he was standing next to Yakumo and Satsuki. Yakumo was scared. No, she was terrified. The few other times that she has seen her blonde teammate angry didn't even come close to this. There was no doubt that someone was going to die. But before she could think any more about the subject, he spoke in a bone-chilling tone. Yakumo. Did they do this? He asked, his voice at the moment lower than a whisper but could be heard by everyone present. Nah, Naruto. Yakumo answered, fear gripping every cell in her body as her blonde teammate turned his head and stared at her with his terrifying eyes. Well? He asked once more in a more demanding voice, to which Yakumo could only nod her head in the affirmative. Getting his answer, Naruto let a chilling predatory smile form on his face as he stared at the other ninja, who were frozen in place. Quote. He said nothing, though his eyes were screaming for blood as he started walking towards the Oto Nin. Who? Don't get you. Zaku shouted, swallowing his fear as he held his arms out in front of him. Zankaha. He screamed as a supersonic blast of air at Naruto, who didn't make any move to dodge, letting the blast hit him as a violent explosion of ground and dust filled the air. Hey, you're not so tough, you bastard. Zaku shouted, but the confidence that he gained was immediately shattered when Naruto stepped out of the dust cloud, no injuries on his person. Narrowing his eyes at Zaku, he disappeared and reappeared next to him, making all of the people present widen their eyes. Delivering a brutal punch to Zaku's side, the sickening crack and crunch of his ribs being destroyed filled the air, as he screamed in unimaginable pain, being lifted into the air from the force of the blow. Grabbing him by the ankle, Naruto turned around and slammed him into the ground, his head hitting the ground with another crunch echoing throughout the area. Naruto repeated the process of picking up and slamming Zaku on the ground until he was nothing but a broken sack of flesh and bone, some of his bones jutting out of his body. After he finished, he threw him to the feet of Dosu and Kin, who screamed and fell on her rear, tears flowing from her eyes as she urinated herself. Dosu fell to his knees as Naruto made his way over to him, shaking uncontrollably with each step that he took. Vanishing, Kin wasn't able to fully turn around as she felt an arm rip through her back and watched in horror as it exploded out of her chest, holding her heart in his hand. Right before everyone's eyes, he crushed her heart as she vomited a mouthful of blood, swaying before hitting the ground, her eyes wide with disbelief. Having seen both of his teammates get murdered so brutally, Dosu couldn't do anything. He couldn't scream when Naruto broke his arm, or when he ripped his arm off. He could only watch in silence as he was dismembered inhumanely, before Naruto brought his foot up, intent on crushing his skull. Suddenly, the world started to go black as he stood above him with his foot descending. But as the world was nearly covered in blackness, it shattered. They were in the same positions as before, but there were notable changes in all three of them. Zaku was trembling with his hands covering his head as he stared at the blonde in front of him. Kin was sitting down, a stain covering the front of her pants as tears flowed out of her terrified eyes. Dosu was shaking as his unfocused eyes locked on with the blonde from before, who was just starting to walk out of the dust cloud. WHWH, what the H hell? Did IG go back in tea time? Dosu screamed in his mind. He had seen Zaku and Kin get brutally murdered and he was just about to die. About to question what was reality and what wasn't. The monster in front of them vanished once again. But there was not sound of Zaku's ribs being shattered, instead there he was, standing behind Zaku. Zaku, behind you! He screamed, or he tried to scream. All that came out was a gurgled noise as he couldn't muster the words to scream. Widening his eyes, Zaku turned around and terrified black met crazed crimson. Before anyone could do anything, Naruto buried his hand into Zaku's shoulder. He wasn't even able to scream in pain fast enough, as the sickening snap of bone alerted them that Naruto had destroyed his rotor cuff. Gah! Zaku screamed in agony, the pain unlike anything that he ever felt in his life. Ripping his hand out, he lashed out with his left foot, connecting and snapping Zaku's right knee joint as his leg was blown out underneath him, making him fall face first towards the ground. He fell faster when Naruto struck the back of his head, making him hit the ground with a hollow crack echoing. To everyone's horror, he stomped on Zaku's other rotor cuff, another crunch echoing out from it being crushed. Once he finished, he turned his attention to his new prey, who were unable to do anything in the face of a monster beyond their comprehension. Dosu wasn't able to do anything when he started walking towards Kin and himself. Locking eyes with him, he felt his very soul being devoured just by looking into those eyes. But before could do anything, they heard a series of groan and moans, the aim and Kusa-nin waking up from the battle from earlier. Naruto stared at them. He decided to deal with them first. Those bitches hit harder than I expected. One of the aim nin said. Yeah, once I get my hands on them they'll be begging for me to kill them. One of the Kusa-nin said. As both groups agreed to get revenge on the girls that beat them, they froze when they felt killing intent like no other. Craning their necks, they saw the blonde for earlier. But this blonde wasn't like they remembered. Before any of them could speak, he lashed out with his foot, connecting with the head of the Kusa-nin who finished speaking, his head jolting at an unnatural angle as he fell to the ground motionless. Pulling out a kunai, he threw it with such force that it embedded itself up to the ring into the skull of the aim nin who spoke earlier, as he fell to the ground also motionless. He stared at the rest of them with burning crimson eyes as they started to panic. Wait. Here. It's our scroll. The aim nin screamed, throwing the scroll at his feet, the Kusa-nin doing the same as they crawled away from the monster in front of them. We weren't going to do anything to them. We swear. They screamed, as he slowly went through a series of hand seals to their horror. They turned to run, and Naruto let them, seeing them soil themselves as the fear overrode all bodily senses. Retracting his hands, Naruto returned his attention to the remaining Oto nin. During the fight, Dosu had collected the broken body of his teammate and kin, and was about to escape, but he was met with the crimson-eyed blonde. Please. You just let us go. We're sorry. But we were under orders. I swear. Dosu begged, as he got on his knees and pleaded for his life, Kin doing the same when she saw those crimson eyes on her. They couldn't react when Naruto appeared next to Dosu, grabbing and breaking the melody arm, and the forearm that it was attached to, Dosu's radius jutting out sickeningly, as he grabbed his ruined arm, screaming in agony. Leave your scroll and get out of my sight. If I see you again, I'll do far worse than what you just experienced. Naruto said in a chilling tone, as Dosu lowered his head whimpering, dropping the scroll on the ground as Kin nodded hers submissively. Once they were gone, he collected the scrolls from the other groups before he made his way towards Yakumo and a now conscious Satsuki, as they gave him terrified looks which made him stop. Seeing his teammates so terrified of him, Naruto could only close his eyes as the curse seal receded, the flame-like markings leaving his face. As it returned to the area on his shoulder, Naruto fell onto his knees as he started panting, feeling the drain of using his new seal for the first time. Regaining his composure, he stood up, albeit shakily, once again and made his way to his teammates. His crimson eyes replaced with his navy ones. But once again, the two backed up when they saw him getting closer. Looking at them, their reactions of unbridled fear, he didn't know why, but he felt a slight pang in his heart. Bowing his head, he nodded as he left the clearing, intent on finding something for them to eat. Fear. That was the only thing that the two could feel at the moment. Their kind, but blank-faced teammate turned into a monster right before their eyes. Yakumo and Satsuki have never felt such fear from one person in their lives. Even their first encounter with Zabuza didn't place that much fear into their hearts. Seeing him approach them with those crimson eyes, they tried to run away from pure instinct. When they did, they saw him stop. After that, they saw that his eyes had returned to their normal navy, but they felt fear from seeing him brutally take down his opponents. But once they saw his eyes, felt their hearts break slightly. They were hurt. Naruto was actually hurt from them acting that way. Once he left, they were both silent, but they knew that they had hurt the person who protected them. Soon, Naruto returned with another small boar. Wordlessly, he prepared the boar and tended to the camp. Ignoring the slightly fearful looks still on his teammates' faces, he also tended to them. Stripping them of their bloody shirts and pants, to their utter mortification, Naruto healed and closed the wounds that they had with the little medical jutsu knowledge that he had. Once he was finished, he wiped down their bodies with a wet towel to clean off the dry blood and grime that had built up, adding even more to their embarrassment. Once he finished, he bandaged and clothed them, all the time, never looking into their eyes or speaking a single word. As night fell, Naruto stayed by the fire as he carried and placed Yakumo and Satsuki into the spare sleeping bags that he had sealed away after he finished feeding them, opting to keep watch for the night. As the two watched the back of their teammate, they couldn't stop their eyes from watering as they reviewed what happened in the past few hours. Even after seeing the fear that they felt towards him, the fear that they knew that he saw, he still cared for them like nothing happened. When they backed away, trying to run, they knew that at that moment they hurt him deeply. The pain that quickly flashed through his eyes wrenched their hearts. Slowly, they quietly cried themselves to sleep, never seeing that Naruto bowed his head slightly as he heard them. Soon, morning came, the forest slowly coming alive with the sounds of the fauna waking up Yakumo and Satsuki. For the first time in nearly 3 days, they had a good night's sleep. But remembering where they were, they quickly tried to get up, but winced as pain shot through their body. Slowly, they managed to ease their way into a sitting position as they saw their blonde teammate still in the same position as he was yesterday, making breakfast. Their eyes softening, they forced themselves to stand up. Using the walls of the tree to help stabilize their balance, they managed to stand up though their legs were a little shaky. Slowly, they made their way towards him, but stopped when he heard him speak. "You two shouldn't be moving yet," he said in a quiet tone, never turning to face them. Hearing his tone, they grew more determined as they finally made it to where he was sitting, their legs finally giving out underneath them. Silence prevailed over the campsite as none of them spoke another word, the quiet crackle of the fire and the ambient sounds of the forest echoing softly in the background. Finally, Yakumo broke the silence. Naruto." She called his name in a soft and unsure tone, hoping that he didn't close off his heart to them after their actions. "What is it?" he asked in an equally soft tone, turning over the fish, choosing not to face them. "Are you all right?" Satsuki continued, reaching out and touching his arm, as Yakumo mirrored the action. "I'm fine," he replied, taking off the fish from the fire and placing it near the two. Seeing that they weren't going to get through to him, they nodded sadly, taking the fish that was obviously placed close for them to reach without straining themselves. As the morning slowly turned into the afternoon, Yakumo and Satsuki were able to move without the sharp pain from earlier. They weren't able to move fast, but they could move. They had 2 days to get to the tower, and they intended to reach it with 1 day remaining. When Yakumo and Satsuki told Naruto that they wanted to continue, he questioned them, telling them that they were unsuited for moving, but they demanded that they keep moving, not wanting to risk the chance of failing. Once he saw their determination return, he nodded, though they never saw the same determination reflect in his eyes as they remained as blank as they were the first day that they met all those months ago. On their way to the tower, Naruto took point. This time they could see that he was tenser than he was at the beginning of the exam. The afternoon sun now clearly overhead, they could see the top of the tower to their joy. But as soon as that joy came, it left when another group of AIM nin ambushed them. "Well, looks like we got lucky, boys. Looks like 2 are injured and the other is exhausted. Quick, take their scrolls," one of the boys said, as his 2 teammates led the charge. Yakumo and Satsuki were about to react, but then they froze when Naruto took a step forward. Arriving at Naruto's position, one of the boys threw a straight punch towards him, which he crouched and dodged, sweeping his feet out from underneath him. As he fell, Naruto spun on his hands and smashed his heel into the side of the AIM nin that he tripped, a cry of pain leaving his lips as he was sent flying. Seeing his teammate get dispatched so quickly, the other boy lost his focus, which Naruto exploited. Throwing a punch that broke the boy's nose, Naruto followed up and punched him in the ribs as he hunched over and grabbed them. He finished off his opponent when he punched him in the jaw, sending him to the ground out cold. Lifting his head up, He started at the boy he assumed was the leader of the team as he shook in fear, not believing that one person could take out his team. He was broken out of his thoughts when Naruto was standing next to him, a cold sweat dropping down the side of his head. His eyes widened and went blank when Naruto buried his fist in his stomach, as he dropped to his knees holding his stomach as he lost consciousness. After dealing with the ninja, he searched them and found another scroll. Having their original Heaven scroll, they now had 2 complete sets of each with an extra Heaven scroll. Looking back at his team, he motioned for them to follow him as they nodded, moving as quickly as they could to reach the tower. As they saw the entrance of the relief-filled Yakumo and Satsuki, finally relaxing visibly as they quickened their pace. Entering the door, they found themselves in an open room with a broken message on the wall. "Without heaven," Yakumo said, furrowing her brows as she tried to decipher the message. "Wait, I think we have to open the scrolls, you guys," Satsuki said after seeing the words for heaven and earth. Looking at each other, the 2 girls nodded as they turned to their male teammate who handed them a pair of the scrolls. Opening them, they panicked when they started smoking. Quickly, they threw the scrolls to the other side of the room, Naruto taking up a protective position in front of his injured teammates. But as the smoke cleared, they were met with the smiling face of Iruka. "Iruka-sensei," Satsuki and Yakumo shouted, relieved to see a familiar face. "Whoa, looks like you guys had some trouble out there, huh?" he said in a worried voice, seeing the state that his previous students were in. "Sensei, why are you here?" Yakumo asked, not expecting to see her old teacher in the exams. "Ah, well, at the end of the second exam, the Chunin meet with the examinees. And I just happened to be the one to greet you 3. He said, as they nodded at his explanation. Pulling out his watch, he smiled seeing that his students made good time. "The second exam. All 3 of you pass. Congratulations." At that, Yakumo and Satsuki got teary-eyed and furiously wiped away the tears that threatened to spill before they gave a brilliant smile. Naruto relaxed visibly, letting out an exhausted sigh as he dropped to one of his knees. "Naruto!" they shouted, rushing over to check on him. As they got a good look at him, they noticed the dark bags under his eyes as he forced himself to stand up despite the protests of the 3 present. "I'm fine. Iruka-sensei, could you take Yakumo and Satsuki to the infirmary? They need a better medical examination than what I provided." At that, Iruka was about to escort the girls, but they quickly snapped at Naruto. "You're coming with us, you idiot!" Satsuki shouted as she grabbed his arm, not going to let him act like the cool guy he was trying to be. "I agree, you're going to the infirmary with us, Naruto. Out of all of us, you're the most injured," Yakumo also said, holding onto his other arm. Sighing, he nodded his head in defeat as Iruka laughed at the scene, Yakumo and Satsuki having victorious smiles on their faces as they followed Iruka to their destination. Time skip 1 day later. After arriving at the tower a day early, Team 12 had the whole day to rest and recover their strength. Once they made it to the infirmary, they saw that Tsunade and Shizune were overseeing the treatment of the patients that came in. They were stunned to learn that they weren't the first ones who made it to the tower, learning that the Sunanin made it within 3 days, but what was more stunning was that they didn't have a scratch on them. As for their injuries, Yakumo and Satsuki had a few minor fractures in their ribs. Their stab wounds weren't infected due to Naruto disinfecting it after the battle. They had some minor bruising around their ribs from when Zaku and Dosu had kicked them, but overall they were in great condition. Naruto, on the other hand, he had some internal bleeding from his battle with Ni, which, when questioned by Tsunade and Shizune, who couldn't believe the extent of the damage, told them that it was just from a fight, which they didn't believe at all. Aside from the internal bleeding, he had some fractures on his ribs and chest area, but they were taken care of by the 2 medics. Once they were finished with their checkups after their treatment, they were allowed to leave, though Naruto fell asleep and quickly gained a severe fever, which made his team and the medics nervous, unable to find what was causing it. At the moment, he was in the bed while his teammates tended to him, taking turns to wet the towel and fold it onto his head. The staff smiling knowingly at them and teasing them that they were taking care of their boyfriend, which they fervently denied. After a while, they were asked to leave as Shizune and Tsunade were going to perform another scan on him. Seeing that they weren't going to be allowed to stay, they took a stroll around the building, and they saw some familiar faces. "Yakumo. Satsuki," a voice called out. Turning around, they were met with a head of blonde hair that belonged to Narumi. Ah, it is you guys. She shouted happily, relieved to see that someone else had passed. Yeah, so you guys made it through the exams too? Satsuki asked, which Narumi nodded, quickly calling over her siblings. Ah, Ya-chan. Mito shouted, hugging her friend who hugged her back. Are you guys okay? Yakumo asked, getting a nod from Menma. Ha, what do you expect? We are the kids of the Hokage. Menma said, as the girls rolled their eyes at his statement. After the introductions were done, they quickly chatted about what happened in the forest. Yakumo and Satsuki not telling them about Naruto, for his request, which they promised not to speak of again. But then Narumi noticed one important thing. Wait, where's Naruni? At that question, Yakumo and Satsuki's happy faces fell into a sad one, scaring the other two girls as Menma narrowed his eyes. He's got a really bad fever. Even Tsunade-sama and Shizune-san aren't able to find out what's causing it. Satsuki said, balling her fists up at her own powerlessness. Hearing that their beloved brother was in such a state made Mito and Narumi panic, as they turned and were about to go see him, but they were stopped by Yakumo and Satsuki. Let go. Mito shouted, trying to pry her hand out of her best friend's grip. I have to go check on Naruni. Narumi shouted, desperately trying to break Satsuki's grip. They stopped when they felt the grip on their wrists tighten. Don't you two think that we want to check on him too? He's our teammate. He's the one who saved us in that forest, and protected us when we were injured. Yakumo shouted, startling the siblings, never hearing her shout in the time that they knew her. I know that you're worried about him, we all are, but there's nothing that we can do to help him. Satsuki said as he released her grip on Narumi, Yakumo following suit. Looking down, Mito and Narumi nodded their heads as Menma just scoffed and left to find Kiba. Scene change. Center Tower. Cafeteria. After the incident from earlier, the girls made their way to the cafeteria in the tower, the tense and depressing atmosphere from earlier gone. Along the way they bumped into Hinata, who Narumi instantly hugged and returned the hug, happy to see that their best friend made it through. Securing a table, they discussed the exams so far and about the most recent happening. So, who else made it so far? Satsuki asked, curious seeing as the entire rookie 15 feet made it past Ibiki's test. Well, we know that 26 teams passed right. The Suna Nin, the Oto Nin, Team 7, Team 8, Team 10, Team 11, Team 12, and the team with that weird green spandex guy are the most notable. Narumi started, putting a piece of tempura in her mouth as her sister swallowed and carried on. From what I've seen so far, Team 12, Team 7, Team 8, and the Suna Nin have made it here. Meaning that out of the 13 possible teams to pass, there are still 9 more left. Mito said, popping a piece of chicken into her mouth as Satsuki decided to add more information. There's not going to be 9 who are going to make it, you guys. Making the other girls, minus Yakumo, stare at her in confusion. What do you mean, Satsuki-san? If 4 teams already made it, then there are still 9 that need to secure a scroll, right? Hinata questioned, as the other girls looked at the two. Satsuki's right, because we're the ones responsible for taking out 3 extra teams. Yakumo said, stunning the others. What do you mean? Mito asked, still not understanding what her best friend was getting at. Well, there would have been 13 people who would have passed correct. Well, with us here, that means that number dropped to 9. But, we also secured an extra set of scrolls, dropping the total number to 8. At that, the other girls gaped at them, not believing that they got an extra set of scrolls. You guys got an extra set. Narumi shouted, getting hit over the head by her sister for her behavior. That's not all, we also secured another heaven scroll, remember Yakumo? That number effectively dropped down to 7. At the added information by Satsuki, their jaws dropped. How many people did you have to fight? Hinata asked, not believing that she heard them correctly. At that question, they saw the two ball up their fists before they answered. We were ambushed by 3 teams. Satsuki said, still angry at the act as Yakumo reflected similar thoughts. Whoa. How did you guys manage to make it? Narumi asked, her eyes wide at hearing about the ambush as Hinata and Mito matched her expression. We each managed to take down a team each, but then the Oto Nin took advantage of our exhaustion and pretty much beat us into the ground. Satsuki explained, as the other girls gained angry expressions. Just as they were about to kill Satsuki. At that, Satsuki clenched her teeth as the others released a gasp. Not believing that one of their friends almost died. Naruto, who was unconscious, woke up and destroyed them. Satsuki finished, as the table grew quiet. Naru ni. What do you mean? Destroyed? Narumi asked almost fearfully, as Mito and Hinata gulped at the ominous way she said it. Let's just say, it wasn't pretty. Yakumo quickly said, having a tone of finality as the others catch on, dropping the subject. There was an awkward silence that appeared, but it was quickly dispelled by Hinata. So who else do you think will pass? At the new topic, they instantly moved past the previous mood and happily chatted amongst each other. Scene change. Inside Naruto's mind. Naruto once again found himself in the same area that he was last time, a place that greatly resembled the place where he met Ryuhei all those years ago. Looking around, he noticed that the lush green grass was withering away, the clean blue water had a tainted purple to it. Soon, he heard a voice laugh through the area. Tensing, he narrowed his eyes and scanned the area. Unable to make heads or tails of its direction, Naruto tried molding chakra but found himself unable to. Suddenly, Naruto fell to his knees as he grabbed at the seal on his neck. The gold ring that surrounded the seal was now black and cracked. Soon, it shattered as the seal started to spread over Naruto's body. Goo. He grit his teeth as he tried to bear the pain that was coursing through his body. As he was trying to fight off the pain, a voice echoed through the clearing. Why are you fighting? Don't you need power? I can give you all the power that you need if you just accept it. The voice echoed, as Naruto put a hand on his head, feeling like it was splitting in half. Get out of my head. He weakly said, the curse seal nearly taking over his body once again. Just accept the power that I gave you, boy. I can give you more once you accept it. The voice continued, as Naruto was at the end of his ropes. Just as he was about to be corrupted by the seal, a comforting and familiar voice spoke. I thought I already warned you. Weakly lifting his head, Naruto's eyes widened when he saw the figure of his older brother. Ryu Nichan. He managed to say, as Ryuhei is at his side. Holding him, Ryuhei placed his hand back on the seal and like last time a golden ring surrounded the seal. The pain that was coursing through his body slowly started to leave as did the cursed seal. Once both completely vanished, Ryuhei helped his little brother up before he was hugged tightly. How are you here? I thought. Naruto asked, his voice trailing off at the end as Ryuhei ruffled his hair. I am. He answered, as he felt Naruto tighten his grip on him. After the two stayed in that position for what seemed like an eternity until Naruto let him go, the two sitting down at the bank of the lake. Silence dominated the two, which was broken by Ryuhei. I bet you're wondering why I'm here, sitting with you like we did in the time, huh? Ryuhei asked, which Naruto nodded in a bashful way. Seeing the reaction of his brother, he put his hand on his head and ruffled his hair. Well, I was going to tell you, but I guess it took me out before I could. Knowing what he was talking about, Naruto balled his hands into fists. When you opened that scroll for the first time, the moment you mixed your blood and chakra with the seal, it placed a seal that I created on you once you made contact with it. What that seal did is what you're seeing right now. I sealed a bit of my chakra and a piece of my soul in it. At his explanation, Naruto's eyes went wide. Does that mean you'll be with me like before? Naruto asked in a desperate tone, making Ryuhei give him a solemn smile in return. I'm sorry, Naruto, but my time is going to be up faster than I expected. Hearing him say that, Naruto could only look down. What do you mean, faster than you expected? What I mean is, I've got to take care of that damned seal on you. Ryuhei said as Naruto snapped his head up to look at him. But before he could say anything, Ryuhei quieted him with another ruffle of his hair. Standing up, he placed his hand over the seal once more. Making an unknown seal, Ryuhei closed his eyes as Naruto felt a tingling sensation that soon turned into a painful one. Snapping his eyes shut, he gritted his teeth as Ryuhei continued to channel chakra into altering the seal. Fuinryu Ugi. Ryujin Gekuren Tentubatsu. Once he shouted the name of his jutsu. Naruto screamed, unbelievable pain coursing through his body. The pain of the cursed seal from earlier would have felt infinitely more bearable than the torture that he was being subjected to now. Snapping his hand to where Ryuhei's hand was, Naruto's left hand started to gouge Ryuhei's while his right was buried into the earth. After what felt like an eternity, Naruto fell face first into the grass, panting as pain spiked randomly through his body. Sitting down next to him, Ryuhei gently patted the area that the cursed seal was located, the dead grass and tainted water being replaced with their natural look before they were tainted. You did great, Naruto. That power, it belongs to you now. Ryuhei said in a soft and proud voice, removing his hand from Naruto. The three-tomo-shaped seal replaced with the head of the dragon. As soon as his hand was removed, the seal started spreading once more. But instead of the black flame pattern from before, black jagged scales started to spread from the seal. Finally Naruto forced himself to sit up. As he did, he widened his eyes as he saw that Ryuhei had tears in his eyes. Ryu-nichan. What's wrong? He shouted, feeling much stronger and faster than before, but he ignored it and approached his older brother. But he was stopped when Ryuhei pulled him into a hug. Naruto. I'm so proud of you. You've become so strong in such a short amount of time. I can see that you've already mastered many of the things that I left in that scroll. Ryuhei said as Naruto lowered his head and returned the hug, knowing what was happening. I'm sad that I haven't been here to watch you grow and become the strong young man that you are now, but I'm glad that I could at least see now, even if it was short. Now tears were streaming down the faces of both as they tightened the hug they shared, both shaking as they tried to stop the sobbing that filled their hearts. Naruto. I'm proud that you found the strength to forgive those who abandoned you and that you've saved and gave strength to those who needed it. Just remember, Otuto, find those special people who you can give a place in your heart. I hope in the future that you find her. And remember, above all else, no matter what, I'll always be here for you. Even if I'm not here physically, I'll always be with you in your heart as long as you don't forget about me. With those words, Ryuhei gave his brother one last brilliant smile that was returned, as a flash of light surrounded the two. Goodbye, Ototo. Goodbye, Ryu-nichan. Scene change. Central Tower. Infirmary. Tsunade and Shizune were confused, more confused than they have ever been in their careers as medics. One moment Naruto's pulse had been low so much that he was considered to be in the Shinigami's grip, his face cold and pale. But strangely, this pulse started to climb back into a stable state, his color returning to its normal natural glow. But what happened next, they never imagined they'd see in their entire lives. They saw Naruto release a stream of tears from his closed eyes, saying the name of someone they didn't have any knowledge of. But before they could think about the situation anymore, Naruto slowly opened his eyes, his normally blank eyes filled with such love, longing, sadness and warmth that they choked on their own saliva, having never seen such beautiful eyes in their lives. But as soon, they returned to their normal blankness, much to their disappointment and confusion. They were broken from their stupor when he slowly sat up and started stretching before he turned to face them. Tsunade-sama, Shizune-san. He greeted them, making them refocus their attention on him. Oh, how are you feeling, Naruto? Tsunade asked, though she really wanted to ask about the name of the person that he whispered. I'm feeling fine, Tsunade-sama. How long was I out? He asked, which she told him that it was the morning of the final day, saying that he was fine for time. Nodding, he moved to get up but was stopped by Shizune, who panicked seeing him move. Naruto-kun. You shouldn't be getting up yet. But Shizune's concerns fell on deaf ears as he stood up, making her immediately get a small blush while Tsunade sighed. He was just in his boxers, allowing the two older women a better view of his body without his life hanging in the balance. Ignoring the two, he put 2 fingers on his wrist as a poof of smoke obscured his hand, set of clothes appearing, a high-collar sleeveless black shirt, black combat pants and boots. After, he started to get dressed as he closed the curtains that surrounded his bed. Once inside, he unsealed a roll of black combat tape and proceeded to wrap both arms up to his elbows. Finished, he pulled back the curtains and was met with a surprised Tsunade and a charmed Shizune. Bowing and thanking the two once more, he excused himself and exited the infirmary. Once he left, Tsunade turned to Shizune and addressed her. Shizune. Hearing her mentor speak in such a serious tone, she quickly lost the pink in her cheeks and stared directly into Tsunade's eyes, giving her full attention. Yes, Tsunade-sama, she answered, feeling slightly nervous, never having seen her mentor like this in quite some time. Do you have a crush on Naruto? Tsunade said in a teasing tone as Shizune's eyes went wide as she started stuttering with a blush on her cheeks. Tsunade-sama. Don't say such things, she screamed, making random motions with her hands at the question her mentor asked. Oh, you do, don't you? Tsunade squealed, as her student started screaming, her hands covering her face. Kameon Shizune. You're only a few years older than him. Don't give up just like that, you've got quite the body, you know. Tsunade said, trying to cheer her student up, only to have Shizune let out one last scream of indignation before she fell backwards onto the bed behind her, her hands still covering her face. Kill me, she begged, as her mentor just laughed loudly at her, continuing to tease her about her crush. Scene change. Central Tower. Cafeteria. As he made his way towards the cafeteria, Naruto noticed that there was no one else around. When he made it to the cafeteria, he got a small bowl of ramen and sat alone on one of the benches in the area. As he was eating, he heard someone and turned to look at them, raising a brow when he saw her. Kintsuchi wasn't having a great day at all. Her team had barely survived their encounter with that blonde demon, and because of the brutal way he took care of Zaku and Dosu, they had a tough time getting into the next part of the exam. But once they were healed back up by the medics, they immediately started beating her again. Sure, she didn't have the melody arm, or the air tubes that Dosu and Zaku had, but that didn't mean she was worthless. Flashback. A few hours earlier. Damn it, this is all your fault, you useless bitch. Zaku shouted, as he backhanded Kin, sending her to the ground as he held her cheek. Goo. It still hurts, he yelled, massaging his newly healed rotor cuffs, before he glared back at the downed girl. You're still a useless bitch, why didn't he kill you instead of breaking my arms? He shouted as kicked her in the side, making her cry out in pain. Tisk, you had better keep your voice down. Zaku snarled, as he stomped out of the room. Pushing herself off the ground, she rubbed her sore side as she sighed. But before she could do anything, she was sent back to the floor by Dosu. Zaku's right, you know. Why were we, the elites, subjected to that monster's wrath while you got away scot-free? It infuriates me, he shouted, also venting his anger by kicking her once again in the side, making her cry out louder in pain. You had better hope that the plan is a success, if it isn't you're going to wish you were dead once me and Zaku are done with you. He threatened her as she shivered, knowing what he was talking about. Finally, he turned his back and left, leaving her alone before a few tears laced her eyes. Why do I have to put up with this? She screamed in her mind. Flashback end. After that, Kin tried to avoid their teammates at all costs, which she managed to do, to her surprise. As time passed, she got hungry and decided to visit the cafeteria, her sides and cheeks lightly bruised from the beating she got earlier. She would have gone to the infirmary, but she would have been questioned as to how she got her injuries while in the tower, which she knew she couldn't say in fear of her teammates. Once she entered the cafeteria, she saw that there was only one person sitting at a table. Exhausted and hungry, she picked up a lunch set and sat down next to them, not paying attention to who it was until it was too late. Quickly giving thanks for the meal, she opened her eyes and was about to dig in when she froze. Slowly craning her neck, her black eyes met navy-colored ones. Silence. Her hands started shaking slightly when she remembered what he did to her teammates. She wanted to run, to get as far away from this monster as she possibly could, but she wasn't able to move a muscle, her fear froze her. She was broken out of her fear-induced state when she heard him speak. Where'd you get that bruise? He asked, stunning her. What? He's asking me about my bruise. Dumbfounded by the question, she could only stare at him in a perplexed manner. There's no way that you'd get a bruise like that in here unless someone else in here caused it. He said, making her freeze, his eyes narrowing slightly at her reaction. Why do you care? After what you did to my teammates, there's no way I'd tell someone like you. She said, trying to look as indifferent as possible, though the tremble of her hand gave away her nervousness. Quote. So your teammates did it, huh? At that, she widened her eyes and dropped her chopsticks. What? How? She stuttered. Now fear did root itself into her heart. Not from the blonde in front of her, but fear of teammates. You're too open. Your reactions to my questions told me pretty much everything, he said, slowly eating his ramen as she panicked. Please. Please don't tell them, she begged. Tears started to flow from her eyes as she pleaded with the blonde to not tell them. She knew that he didn't know what they'd do to her, he wouldn't care either. She flinched, however, when he cupped her cheek, instantly making her quiet down. Feeling his hand on her cheek, Kin instantly turned pink, never having anyone do such a thing to her in her life. Never had she experienced someone place their hand on her cheek with such gentleness, usually they just backhanded or slapped her. Before she could do anything, she felt the numb pain slowly fade, being replaced with a warm and comforting sensation that nearly made her moan in pleasure. After a few minutes of bliss, the feeling slowly faded, to her disappointment. But immediately after, she stared at the blonde in front of her in disbelief at what he just did. He not only cupped her cheek, he healed her. Why? She asked, genuinely curious about his actions. You're not like your teammates. Once those words left his mouth, her eyes widened. But before she could question him, he continued. When they were attacking Yakumo and Satsuki, you stayed behind. When they were being beaten into the ground, you didn't watch. They have disgusting and foul-feeling chakra coursing through them while your chakra feels conflicted and confused. You're lost, aren't you? Naruto said, turning slightly to face her. Once she heard his words, without knowing herself, tears started to fall from her eyes. How does he know? I've never told anyone about how I feel, but how does he know what I really feel inside? All her life, since she was picked up as an orphan by ninja under Hiriko's command, she never felt that she belonged. While others were killing and torturing others, she didn't. She never participated in any of the torture training that was mandated, opting to do something less disturbing like practice with her bells. Never had she made a friend. A friend in Odo was simply someone who would work with you until you stopped being useful to them. She never had anyone to talk to, no one to confide to, and yet. How did this person, who shouldn't be treating her like this, know? She was broken out of her thoughts when she felt something brush against her face. He was wiping away her tears. Why? Why are you acting like this to me? Why are you treating me like this? What do you want from me? She shouted as she stood up, her voice echoing in the empty dining room. Her eyes were snapped shut, trying to forget those beautiful blue eyes that looked at her with such concern in them. Slowly she sat back down, tears still streaming down her face as her body shook slightly from crying. Soon, she felt a warm hand on the top of her head and looked up, sniffling as she wiped away the tears that fell from her eyes. Once again, she saw those blue eyes that captured her very soul looking at her. Someone important to me told me that when you see someone crying in front of you, even if you don't have the strength or any knowledge of their situation, to help them no matter what their circumstances are. I follow those words and keep them close to heart because he did the same to me. Naruto said as she lowered her head, taking in the warm feeling of his hand. After spending a few minutes in this position, Kin wiped away the last tears that she had in her eyes before she looked at him. Staring into his blue eyes, Kin couldn't help the blush that appeared on her face as she slowly leaned forward. As she neared his face, she closed her eyes, as she felt herself kissing something warm. Opening her eyes slightly, she snapped them wide open when she saw that she had kissed his hand as he had a blank look on his face. What are you doing? He asked in a flat tone. Kin turned and focused her attention to the floor, soon developing a burning blush on her cheeks from her unconscious action. Trying to kiss someone whose name you don't even know, it's a little odd. Naruto continued as she turned even more red, steam starting to come out of her ears. But before she could explode from the embarrassment, Naruto spoke once more. Well, whatever, I'm Naruto, he said, introducing himself as she looked up, a bashful look on her face. Kin Tsuchi, she said in an embarrassed tone. Finishing introductions, they started to talk about trivial things, Kin slowly losing the bashful expression she had as she started to smile and giggle more. Naruto had his same blank expression, but there was a small smirk on his face when Kin told him about some of the embarrassing things that she witnessed in Oto. As they talked, they never noticed that morning slowly turned into the afternoon. After spending a few hours talking with each other, Kin bid him a tearful farewell. Making him raise an eyebrow at her, she made it out like she was going to never see him again. But she gained a little more confidence when he reassured her that if she needs anything while still in Konoha, that he would try his best to help her. After he said that, she surprised him greatly. Leaning in close and tiptoeing a little, Kin cupped his face and gave Naruto a long kiss on the cheek as he widened his eyes slightly as a bit of pink invaded his face. Slowly, she pulled away, a crimson blush and serene smile on her face. What? Why'd you do that? He said, stuttering slightly with his hand on the place where she kissed him, his usual cool and calm front cracked by her action. Because I like you, she said with her eyes closed, a stunning smile on her now pink face. Before Naruto could do anything, she quickly made her way out of the dining room, leaving a stunned Naruto behind, who futilely tried to analyze what just happened. Unknown to them, there was someone who saw the whole exchange happen, an enraged look appearing on his face before he disappeared into the hallway. After seeing the scene of Kin kissing the blonde shinobi from Konoha, the Jonin sensei in charge of their team angrily left the scene. Had she forgotten what their mission was? They were supposed to infiltrate and weaken the defenses from the inside, but what did he find her doing instead? He found her locking lips with the enemy. Cursing to himself, he knew that she was mostly likely going to be a liability now. Making a mental note to himself, he returned to his temporary quarters intent on relaying the piece of information to his lord. Once he snapped out of the trance that Kin put him in with her kiss, he left the dining hall, his eyes still glazed over as the image of Kin's blushing face and smile remained on his mind before he shook his head to get rid of the memory. Out of dining room, he made his way to the arena where they were going to meet in the morning, his mind going through the hundreds of scenarios that could possibly happen in the next few hours. However, he slowly found himself thinking about the incident that just happened once again. Lost in his thoughts, he didn't notice the group of people who gawked and pouted at him, as he walked past without greeting any of them. Before he reached the end of the hall, he was tackled from behind, making him fall face first into the ground as a few shrill screams and shouts made it to his ears. Letting out a sigh, he immediately knew who tackled him from their smell and the few locks of blonde hair that were scattered around him. Pushing himself off the ground, he felt Narumi's arms wrapped tightly around his waist as her face was buried in his back. Narumi, you can't just tackle Naruto Nichan like that. Mito shouted as her eye twitched, seeing her younger sister tackle her older brother for ignoring her. HMPH. This is what he gets for ignoring me, she said in an angry tone, an angry pout matching her voice as she tightened her grip on her brother. Narumi-chan, please let go of Naruto-kun. He can't get up if you keep clinging to him. Hinata told her best friend, only for Narumi to stick her tongue out at her, not relinquishing her prize. Just as things were about to get more complicated, Naruto removed Narumi's hands from his waist, the way he did it stunning her. Usually, he would remove her hands in a slightly more forceful way, but this time she felt his hands wrap around hers as he gently opened her hands. Feeling the warmth of his hands, she felt herself melt, immediately losing her ironclad grip. Once free, he didn't even turn around and scold her, he just continued walking with the same glazed look in his eyes. But he was stopped once again, this time by Yakumo and Satsuki, who grabbed each of his arms, having had enough of him ignoring all of them. Naruto, what are you doing? Are you just going to ignore us? Satsuki shouted, moving in front of him to face him, her hand wrapped around his wrist. Is there some reason why you're ignoring us, Naruto? Yakumo asked, though she mirrored Satsuki's actions, moving to stand in front of him. Both had angry stares on her faces coupled with a small pout. But they quickly lost their anger when they saw that he was deep in thought. Tilting their heads, they let go of him and were about to question him when someone else did. What makes you think you can ignore us, you loser? Menma shouted, grabbing his older brother by the shoulder and forcibly turning him around as everyone tensed up, hoping that a fight didn't break out. Though that thought dissolved when Naruto brushed off Menma's hand and turned around to headed back to his original destination. No one had believed what they just saw. Naruto would usually do the same thing, but he always gave Menma a cold glare. This time he kept the dazed look from before. Seeing as everyone froze, including his best friend, Kiba growled before he repeated the action, this time getting face to face with Naruto. As he was about to shout, he smelled something and immediately widened his eyes. Everyone looked on in curiosity when Kiba backed up and pointed an accusatory finger at Naruto while gawking. Why? He stuttered, never being able to form a coherent word as everyone grew confused. Swallowing, he took a deep breath before he shouted at Naruto. Why do you have the smell of a girl on you? He shouted, not believing that he smelled the unfamiliar scent of a girl on the blonde. At his statement the group grew quiet, so quiet a pin dropping could sound similar to an explosive tag going off. Slowly they craned their heads to stare at the blonde in front of him as he retained his dazed look and glazed over eyes. Slowly, the group closed in on the older blonde, the guys with questioning and curious stares while the girls, Mito, Narumi, Satsuki, and Yakumo, had scary looks on their faces. Before he could do anything, they dog-piled on the distracted blonde, the guys holding him down on the orders of the girls. So Kiba, whose smell does it belong to? Mito said in a scary sweet tone, a terrifying smile appearing on her face as the boys shivered in fear, Naruto excluded. I don't know. It's a foreign smell, he said, as the others froze. A foreign smell? That could only mean a girl outside of Konoha. But that's not the only thing I smelled. I also smelled a lot of estrogen on him, which could only mean one thing. He trailed off. Jealousy was burning in his eyes as they waited for him to finish. Just tell us, dog breath. Satsuki shouted, her Sharingan blazing in anger and jealousy herself. It means that she marked him. He said as silence reigned over the group, everyone now being red in the face, be it jealousy, anger, or embarrassment. Though, the anger and jealousy on the faces of 4 girls in particular could only be described as demonic by the others. Slowly they reached out to grab Naruto by the collar, but as they grabbed him by his shirt, he vanished, the discarded piece of clothing hanging limply in their now shaking hands. Hearing footsteps, they snapped their heads around and saw him walking away, a black tank top on in place of his high-collared sleeveless shirt. Without turning around, he left the now confused and fuming group behind. Time skip. The next day. Avoiding all contact with the other ninja by sleeping outside and on the top of the tower, Naruto woke up in the same spot that he had slept, having lost the glazed look in his eyes from yesterday's event. Knowing that he acted extremely different from his usual self, he sighed as he knew that the others were most definitely still angry and suspicious of his behavior yesterday. Pushing those thoughts to the back of his head, he stared into the cloudless sky, seeing a number of birds fly here and there as he waited for the announcement of the meeting that was scheduled for the morning. Apparently there was an unexpected number of genin who passed, so there was going to be a preliminary that is going to be held. Closing his eyes once again, he slowly took in the feeling of the nature around him, never noticing the scale-like pigmentation that slowly started to appear around his eyes. As a peaceful smile came on his face from the serene feeling of the world around him, he left as he heard a buzzer come from the PA announce the start of the meeting. The peaceful expression leaving his face, it was replaced with his normal blank face as he made his way to the meeting hall. Scene change. Central Tower. Meeting hall. Gathered in a large room, with raised platforms on both sides secured with railings, a large pair of arms with their hands in the shape of the ram's seal, the remaining examinees stood in front of the Hokage, their Jonin sensei, a few other Jonin and Chunin as they waited for him to speak. As Minato was about to begin, the silence of the room was broken with the soft sound of footsteps approaching. Everyone turning their heads to the direction of the noise, varying expressions appeared on the faces of the people present. Knowing that he was a little late, Naruto didn't pay attention to the stairs and opted to move to the where his teammates were standing, ignoring the piercing and burning glares that were being cast at him. Glancing quickly to the side, he saw Kin with her cheeks pink wearing a small smile on her face as she stared longingly at him, almost causing him to falter. Once in position, he turned and faced Minato, who gave him a smile in return. Seeing all the examinees finally gathered, Minato motioned for Zabuza to address them as he nodded his head. First of all, I want to congratulate all of you for passing the second exam. Though, I didn't expect so many of you brats to actually make it. Zabuza said, making some of the genin shiver at his insinuation of having thought that they'd die in the forest. It's because there are so many of you that Hokage-sama decided to change up the exams a little this year. With that, I'll give him the floor to explain it, so you had better listen up. He barked, making some of the genin stiffen up at his tone as Minato laughed wryly. Before I start with the explain of the upcoming event, I want to tell you all the real reason behind these exams. After the words left his mouth, the genin gained confused and curious looks, making Minato smile. I want you to know, without any sugar-coating or lies, that this exam is here to promote and show off the prestige and power of each of the allied villages that are attending. Minato said in a stern tone, his eyes losing all traces of the kindness from earlier. What? What the heck do you mean? Isn't this just to see who has what it takes to be a Chunin? Menma shouted at his father as Kiba backed him up, getting sharp looks from their sensei in return. Of course, that is correct as well. This exam tests all of you to see if you have the merit to be Chunin, but there is also the reason that I was trying to explain earlier. In this exam, there will be many influential and powerful individuals that will give their assessment on all of you, to see if you meet the criteria needed to be a Chunin. Because of that, whoever makes their village stand out and shine more, will in turn bring more clients and in turn, missions to their village, the opposite being true for those who muddle their village's name. I want you all to show that you can shine, no matter how small the village you came from. At that, the genin gained determined looks on their faces as they listened to Minato's rallying speech. I want you all to know that the strength of a country is the strength of its village. And the strength of the village is the strength of its ninja. We can only gain such strength in times where we risk our very lives, as a ninja's true strength and worth is determined through life-risking battles. With that, I'll explain what will happen with this event. We will be having a preliminary battles to reduce number of eligible number of candidates. Each battle will consist of 2 ninja chosen at random, which holds the possibility of having to battle your teammates. At that, everyone tensed and eyed each other. So, before we start, I want to let all of you know that from this point on, your team members no longer need to all pass their respective battles in order for you to advance. So, those of you who wish to drop out, please raise your hands. Once he asked, slowly, 8 genin rose their hands, looks of defeat and exhaustion filling their eyes. Nodding his head, Minato glanced around and quickly counted out the number of remaining genin. From the 11 teams and 33 genin that passed, 8 left. Having finished with his explanation, Minato turned and gave the genin a clear view of the randomization panel. Nodding his head, it started flashing through the names of the genin present. Tensing, everyone watched the screen intently, seeing their own names flash for an instant before changing. Finally, the first pair of names were drawn. Choji versus Kiba. After making every clear the area, Minato gestured to Hayate, who was going to proctor the battles. Once everyone was on the upper level of the room, Choji and Kiba made their way down to the floor. This will be interesting, Asuma said as Kurenai nodded in agreement. I mean, no offense Asuma, but Kiba has the match in his favor. Kurenai said, a small smile on her face. Hearing that, Asuma frowned. Hey Choji, if you win this match I'll take you out for all you can eat. He shouted, as everyone else sweat dropped at his declaration. Yosh. Sorry Kiba, but I gotta win this buddy. Choji said, fires of determination burning in his eyes as Kiba laughed. Whoa, hold your horses Choji. I hate to break your bubble but I'll be taking this one. Kiba said in an excited tone of voice as Akamaru barked in agreement. Alright then, let the first match begin. Hayate declared, jumping back as the two mimicked the action. Let's get wild Choji. Kiba shouted, pulling out and throwing a hail of shuriken at the other boy, who countered with his own hail of steel. You can bet on it Kiba. Choji shouted as he and Kiba ran towards each other, Akamaru jumping out of his partner's jacket. Meeting in the center of the arena, the echo of metal sounded out as the shuriken met, the two who threw them engaged in a battle of taijutsu. Once they met in the center of the ring, both lashed out with their fists, a hollow echo from the impact of their fists against each other. Quickly drawing his fist back, Choji took a step forward and slammed his shoulder into Kiba, putting the weight of his body into his attack. He sent Kiba flying a few feet back from the power of his blow. Rolling back to his feet, Kiba tensed up in his crouched position before he exploded forward in an impressive show of speed, much faster than Choji could react to. Fast. The word flew through Choji's mind, knowing that in terms of speed, he was outmatched considerably by his friend. Appearing to the side of Choji, Kiba spun and swept his feet from underneath him, before lashing out with his fist which impacted Choji's stomach. Goo! Choji stifled the cry of pain that he had, placing his hand over his stomach as Kiba rubbed his shoulder from where Choji's shoulder had impacted from earlier. "You've gotten a lot stronger, Choji," Kiba said, flashing a feral grin at the larger boy, getting a smile in return. "Yeah, you're a lot stronger than you were in the academy, Kiba," Choji replied before settling back into a stance, Kiba doing the same. They collided once again, Choji landing a powerful palm strike on Kiba's chest, sending him back while forcing the air out of his lungs. Not easing on his assault, he continued, driving a powerful knee into his friend's stomach. But he wasn't able to fully connect his attack as Kiba sidestepped at the last second, and returned Choji's attack with a straight that connected to his jaw, rattling his head slightly. Backing away from each other, they winced as they felt their injuries. Still not funny recovered from the forest, they knew that they wouldn't last long if things continued. "Because we're friends, I'm not going to hold back, Kiba," he yelled, before making a hand sign that was recognized by his peers. "Baika no Jutsu," he shouted, as he expanded his body into a larger, rounder shape resembling a large ball. "Oh shit, Akamaru," Kiba shouted. Knowing what his friend was going to do, he called Akamaru onto his back as he crouched down, called out a jutsu that was also known by his peers. "Shikyaku no Jutsu. Jujin Bunshin." As a cloud of smoke covered Akamaru, in his place another Kiba stood crouched on top of the original. Tensing, they gave each other a grin before they attacked. "Nikuden Sensha. Gatsuga." As Choji started tucked in his limbs and used his chakra to propel himself forward in a powerful roll. With Choji advancing, Kiba and Akamaru spun with such speed that they resembled a drill as they wrapped around each other before meeting Choji's attack head-on. The result of the two attacks colliding being a small explosion of dust and rubble, as their sensei looked on with concern. The smoke starting to clear, they saw that both Choji and Kiba were still standing, though Akamaru was laying limply at the side. "Ha, ha, looks like that's game, huh, Choji?" Kiba asked, panting as he gave his friend another smile. "Yeah, looks that way, Kiba," Choji said, returning the smile. Soon, the two started to sway before they hit the ground, as Hayate signaled the medics. "For the first match, it's a draw," he said loudly, before coughing slightly as everyone looked on with stunned expressions from the result of the battle. After the battle that Choji and Kiba had, Hayate turned and motioned for the next randomization to begin. Sakura vs. Ino. At that, practically everyone sighed, somehow they weren't surprised at the matchup. Making their way down to the floor, Sakura and Ino both had smug looks on their faces as they faced each other. Looking at both girls, Hayate nodded before he commenced the start of the second match. "You're going down, forehead. You're mincemeat, Ino pig," they shouted as they rushed each other, making their sensei sigh at their recklessness. Sticking to the basic academy taught taijutsu, the match wasn't very interesting as they were able to block and counter each other, being so familiar with the style and the habits of their opponent. Seeing as the match was going nowhere, Ino broke off and threw a volley shuriken at Sakura, who responded by using a smoke bomb to conceal herself, the shuriken flying out of the cloud having missed their intended target. As the cloud started to disperse, Sakura ran out of the cloud, to Ino's shock. Quickly snapping herself out of her stupor, she narrowed her eyes as she wasn't able to determine which were the clones and which was the original. Cursing under her breath, she threw a volley of kunai that instantly was avoided by the Sakura on the right. Smirking, Ino rushed forward as Sakura righted herself and repeated the action. Engaging once again in a taijutsu bout. Slowly, they began to run out of energy, their movements becoming much more sluggish, signaling that the end was approaching as they broke off from each other. Taking in a deep breath, Ino held her hands out in front of her as Sakura gasped, knowing what she was going to do. But before she could dodge, Ino had already locked onto her. "Shintenshin no Jutsu," Ino shouted as Sakura and her body slumped to the ground, showing that her jutsu was indeed a success. Slowly, Sakura stood up, a smirk on her face. Turning to Hayate, She began to raise her hand to show that she was giving up, but halfway she froze and grabbed at her head. What? What's happening? Ino shouted, looking around Sakura's mind, and froze when she saw a giant version of Sakura with burning eyes staring at her. Ino pig. You're not making me give up that easily. She shouted, her fist colliding with Ino, and in turn forcing her out of her mind. My head. Ino moaned, massaging her temples from the rough ejection that she just had. Not so tough are you, Ino pig. Sakura sneered, as Ino gained a number of tick marks on her head. Finally, they decided to end the duel, each rushing in with their fists back. Slowly, they neared each other, let their punches go, colliding with the cheek of the other. Once they connected, they were sent flying back from the momentum gained from the running start, where they laid motionless. Looking at both of them, Hayate nodded before raising his hand. The second match ends in a draw, he said, as Asuma and Genma picked up their genin and brought them to the balcony, where their peers peeked at them, wondering if they were all right. They'll be fine, they're probably just a little rattled right now, Asuma said as Genma nodded, extinguishing the worries that they held. As the battle ended and they were picked up, the screen flashed once again, this time landing on two very different people. Shikamaru versus Sai. At that, Shikamaru groaned while Sai looked like he was contemplating something. Suddenly, as they were about to walk towards the ground floor, Sai raised his hand. Proctor, I'd like to forfeit. Making everyone drop their jaws at the proclamation. Why are you dropping out, Sai? Genma said, an accusatory glint in his eyes that didn't seem to faze Sai as he gave the same fake smile as always. No reason in particular, I'm just not confident that I can take out Lazy. He answered, making Genma look at him for a while before nodding slowly. Getting the confirmation from Genma, Hayate announced the winner. The third match, winner by forfeit is Shikamaru. As everyone's sweat dropped at the victory as Shikamaru just sighed. After that was all settled, the screen flashed once again. Konkuro versus Yasuo. At that, Konkuro and the last remaining Kusa-nin made their way down to the floor. Seeing both were ready to start, Hayate signaled the start of the battle, Yasuo going on the offensive with a hail of shuriken that Konkuro aptly dodged. You really should give up before I hurt you, Yasuo said, pulling out a handful of Senbon as Konkuro sneered at him. Like you're in a position to do that, Yasuo shouted, seeing the overconfidence that seemed to ooze out of the other team. Throwing his Senbon, he was stunned when Konkuro made no effort to dodge, opting to get hit by the attack. But after being stunned, he became fearful as Konkuro's face started to chip and flake off, revealing a frightening visage. Jumping back, he was met with the now revealed puppet as it quickly appeared next to him. What? Yasuo shouted, as the puppet grabbed him and proceeded to crush him slowly. You should give up now, if you do I won't crush you. A voice called out, soon to be revealed to be Konkuro, who appeared out of the bandaged sack on the floor. Goo. Go to hell. Yasuo wheezed out, glaring at the other team. Sighing, Konkuro tightened the grip that Crow had on him, knocking him out by cutting off his air. As Crow released the boy, letting him drop to the floor as it made its way back to Konkuro. Quickly checking if he was alive, Hayate nodded as he motioned for the medics to tend to the boy. Winner of the match, Konkuro, Hayate said as he made his way back to the stands, getting nervous looks from the other genin at winning with a minimal show skill. After the short battle, the battles continued on. While most were even, there were a few that were notable. The battle between Tenten and Temari was a one-sided bout. Tenten began the match by throwing a few of her weapons at Temari while keeping the best distance for offense and defense. Though Temari easily blew the weapons away with her fan. Everyone, especially her teammates, were surprised that not one weapon reached Temari. Since nothing had even come close to hitting Temari, Tenten used one final technique that she said she was saving for the finals. Her Soshoryu was powerful, but ultimately ineffective against Temari's fan. As Tenten ran out of weapons, she used strings to control the weapons and fling them once again back at Temari, in an attempt to surprise her. Temari, however, quickly used her fan to blast Tenten, along with her weapons, and she hit the floor. Temari finally used her fan to trap Tenten in a cyclone and propel her into the air. As the cyclone dispersed and Tenten fell to the ground, Temari had Tenten land on her closed fan, knocking her unconscious and calling the match she just had boring. Even after she was declared the winner of the match, she threw Tenten off of the fan in attempt to have her land on the many weapons on the ground to injure her more. However, Lee jumped in to save Tenten before she hit the ground. After that, Lee attacked Tamari after she told them about how weak she was, and the latter responded by blocking and calling them weak. Just as he was about to attack once more, Guy stepped in and stopped Lee from doing so. After, he told the last remaining member of the Suna team, Gaara, that if he were to fight Lee he would be in for a tough time, stating that Lee was strong. Once they made their way back to the stands, Hinata and Neji were the next to battle. While both sides received words of encouragement, Neji told his cousin that it was a futile battle that she was about to have with him. Though he didn't resent her, he did resent the fact that his uncle was made the clan head while his father was pushed into the branch family. Signaling the start of the battle, both rushed each other, and at first it seemed even. But eventually, Neji started to wear Hinata down, managing to strike her shoulder and leg, disabling them just long enough to land a damaging palm strike to her chest. Hinata, however, even after receiving the damaging attack, stated that she could continue, which Neji shook his head at, saying that it was fated that he would win this match and she would lose. This was proven true when Neji managed to land another palm strike to the same area that he struck before, causing Hinata to spit out a mouthful of blood to the horror of everyone present. Catching his cousin, he laid her on the ground and gave her a look of pity, shaking his head while walking away as the medics tended to her. Angrily, Narumi demanded why he damaged her so much when he knew he was stronger than her. Without turning around, Neji told her that it was fated to happen, that her weakness isn't something that she could change no matter how much she trained, causing Narumi to lunge at him while Kakashi and Mito held her back. After that, matches turned up a notch when Lee and Gaara were selected to battle. At first Lee wasn't able to land a clean hit on Gaara, his sand acting as a shield that protected him for all of Lee's attacks no matter how fast or what angle that it came from. When his standard attacks proved unable to bypass Gaara's defenses, with permission from Guy, he removed his ankle weights to increase his speed and managed to land a couple of hits on Gaara. Then, he attempted the Omet Renge, but Gaara was able to escape at the last minute, revealing a sand clone instead. Once he used his Omet Renge, Lee was able to use and open the first few gates of the Hachiman, allowing him to stage a comeback against Gaara, whose sand wasn't able to keep up with his increased speed, actually managing to land a damaging punch which sent Gaara flying to the shock of everyone present. But soon, he started to slow down once the side effects of the opening the Hachiman started to affect his body. His options running out if he was to win and prove himself, Guy allowed him to use the Ura Renge. Gaara barely survived by turning his gourd to sand to cushion him, and the techniques took a massive toll on Lee's body. Gaara added to Lee's injury by used his Sabaku Q to trap his arm and leg, then proceeded to crush his left arm and leg with his Sabaku Soso. Though Guy intervened and stopped Gaara from killing him, though to the shock of everyone present, Lee got to his feet to continue the battle despite being completely unconscious. Seeing that Hayate called the match there, knowing that Lee was in no shape to continue no matter how much determination he displayed. Once the two were off the arena, Minato motioned for a few of the Jonin to mend the ruined arena. Using a collaboration Hiban Tataki, they quickly flattened and fixed the once ruined arena. Seeing the power that he had, when he was only a year older than them, the other genin couldn't help but shiver slightly, knowing that they would have been crushed had they fought Lee. But they also let out a few breaths of relief as the strongest were finished with their battles. The screen flashed once again, displaying Kin and Narumi's names. Making their way to the floor, Narumi narrowed her eyes at the Oto Nin, remembering what her team did to her older brother on the first day of the exam. Kin, on the other hand, knew that she had some relation to her Naruto, and wanted to prove herself to him. Signaling the start of the match, Narumi intended to end this as soon as possible. Quickly making the signature cross-shaped hand seal that her and her siblings had become affiliated with, she created a few cage bunshin that immediately rushed to take Kin down. Stunned from seeing actual and physical clones, Kin panicked but steeled her resolve, throwing a handful of Sanban that hit the clones in their necks, causing them to dispel upon being hit. Not letting up after seeing her clones dispelled, Narumi quickly rushed towards Kin, dropping low and sweeping her feet from underneath her. Quickly spinning, Kin managed to throw another handful of Sanban at Narumi, who sidestepped but widened her eyes when she felt the pain of being hit. Glancing down, she saw the Sanban that she knew she dodged lodged in her side. Yanking it out, she stepped back when Kin threw another handful of Senbon, a ringing echoing out when they hit the ground. Hearing the noise, Narumi winced as she shook her head trying to get rid of the ringing that filled her ears. Seeing that her Hurricane Maimu worked, Kin was about to advance but the Narumi in front of her dispersed in a cloud of smoke as the real Narumi gave Kin a devastating punch that sent her to the wall, her head impacting it with a hollow sound echoing out. Hayate checking on the downed Kin signaled the medics to take care of her. Seeing that her opponent wasn't going to get up, Narumi flashed the victory sign at her father and sibling who laughed wryly. After she made her way to the stands, she immediately clung to her older brother to the ire of some of the people there, namely the boy in question, as she badgered him about if he saw her or not. Sighing to himself, he didn't attempt to remove his sister, more preoccupied about the next contestant seeing as he was one of them. Watching the screen flash once more, the names of the next competitors came on. But as Sasuke was about to head down, Shino raised his hand to signal that he was forfeiting to the shock of everyone present. Shino, why are you forfeiting? Kurenai asked, really curious of the reason her normally stoic and logical student had. Sasuke-san specializes in Kaden Jutsu while I only have my Kikaichu to rely on. Because of that alone, I am already at a disadvantage because he can burn away my Kikaichu. Adding to that, he is much more skilled than I am at Taijutsu. But above all else, I would like to avoid having my Kikaichu perish unnecessarily. Shino said, making most of the people there nod their heads at the points he brought up. Nodding to Hayate, Kurenai signaled that he was indeed forfeiting as Hayate declared Sasuke the winner, who had a large smirk on his face. Though it fell and became a frown when he noticed that a certain crimson-haired girl wasn't paying any attention to him and instead directed all of her attention to her older brother. Once the next pair of names came on, there were 3 people who darkened considerably, releasing a surprisingly potent amount of killing intent. These 3 were none other than the members of Team 12. Yakumo vs. Zaku. Seeing the name of the Oto Nin who ambushed them, they were filled with rage and anger. Zaku made his way down to the floor first, sneering at them as he waited for Yakumo. What? Don't tell me you're still scared of me, he said in a condescending tone, making them burn even more with rage. As Yakumo was about to head down, she was stopped by her teammates. Make him pay what he did, Yakumo. End him. A smirk appearing on her face from the words of encouragement that she got from her teammates, she dropped down to face Zaku who flinched a little seeing her eyes sharpen. Glancing at both of them, Hayate nodded before signaling the start of the next match. Instantly, Zaku held out his arms as he shouted at her. Ha! You should have done more than what you did to my arms, you bastards. Zankaha! He shouted as he fired off another powerful blast of air at Yakumo that exploded the moment it hit the ground, dust and rubble flying from the attack. Smirking, he brought his hands down as he knew he ended her. But then he noticed that she wasn't there. About to look around he wasn't able to as Yakumo buried her fist into his stomach, forcing the air out of his lungs. Not letting him get any ground, Yakumo spun on her heel and smashed her other one into his face, breaking his nose and sending him stumbling backwards. Sprinting, she jumped and smashed her knee into his face, knocking a few of his front teeth out, sending him to the ground. As he hit the ground, she spun in the air and finished her assault by smashing her heel into his head, a hollow crack echoing from the attack. Standing up with a cold look on her face, she glared at him as he laid out cold from her ruthless assault. Turning her head towards Hayate who was stunned at how quickly and brutally she disposed of him, he snapped out of his stupor and quickly called her the winner as she made her way back to her team. You should have picked him apart more, Yakumo. Tisk. Should have crippled him. Satsuki and Naruto said as she returned, each having a small smirk on their faces from the efficient way she took him down. Their actions caused the other genin to shiver a little, hearing that they wanted him to suffer more than he did, that alone changed the way that they viewed the team. Once Zaku was carted off the arena, the screen flashed again, landing on 2 very volatile individuals. Satsuki vs. Menma. The tension that filled the air after seeing those names was thick, Menma and Satsuki casting a glare at the other. Quietly they made their way down to the arena floor as everyone looked on in apprehension, knowing that it would be an explosive fight. Seeing that both were ready, Hayate signaled the start of the battle and instantly, they clashed together, kunai in hand. Tisk. Satsuki said as Menma slowly started to overpower her. Shifting her body slightly, she threw Menma off as he stumbled forward from the sudden loss of opposing force keeping him steady. Damn! He shouted, blocking a kick from Satsuki and responding with a spinning back fist which she ducked under. Crouching low, she spun and smashed her heel into his side as he took the brunt of the blow and grabbed her leg, making her eyes widen. Kicking the other foot out from underneath her, he slammed her into the ground, Satsuki crying out in pain from the force that she hit the ground with. Her eyes widened when Menma buried his fist into her stomach, before she grit her teeth and struck him at his knee joint, her heel hooking around the bend of the joint and bringing him down. Taking the opportunity, she rolled away as he regained his balance. Rubbing her stomach to ease the pain, she winced when her back felt as stiff as a board. Menma on the other hand rubbed his knee, having hit the ground hard when Satsuki knocked his balance off. Standing up, Satsuki got serious as she activated her Sharingan, making everyone widen their eyes while Sasuke growled. Narrowing them at her opponent, she charged in once again and blocked Menma blow for blow, making his eyes widen in shock. Finally, she broke his guard and landed a clean blow on his cheek, sending him stumbling backwards. Not letting up, she charged at him and jumped, in an attempt to hit him with the same style high kick that Lee had used earlier. She was stunned however when Menma once again took the blow, and grabbed her leg, this time turning and using the momentum behind the kick to slam her once again into the ground as Satsuki cried out in pain, feeling something snap on her arm. But Menma didn't let up his assault now that he had the advantage as he dropped his knee onto the same spot he had hit her earlier, making her cry out once again in pain. As he was about to punch her, she moved her head to the side as Menma cried out in pain, having hit the hard floor of the arena. Taking advantage of her situation, Satsuki lashed out and landed a palm strike to his chest, making him get off her. Rolling backwards, Satsuki flashed through a series of seals before locking onto Menma. Sweden. Teppadama, she shouted, firing a volley of high-speed water bullets at a stunned Menma. He rolled to the side, but immediately cried out in pain as one of the bullets impacted against his thigh, as he tried to put the pressure off his now injured leg. Glaring at Satsuki, who now looked exhausted having kept her Sharingan on for so long, Menma flashed through his own set of seal as Satsuki copied the sequence, much to his disdain. Futon. Daitapa, he shouted, pouring an insane amount of chakra into his jutsu, the resulting wind sending Satsuki flying to the opposite side of the wall, as she cried out in pain from the impact. But Menma didn't end his assault there. Making the signature seal of the Cage Bunshin, Menma made a clone who started flashing through a set of seals along with him as Satsuki weakly started to stand up, her Sharingan replaced with her regular onyx eyes. As she managed to find the strength to stand, both Menma and his clone had finished their seals. Futon. Daitapa. Kaden. Enden. The adults widened their eyes at the potentially fatal combination that Menma had used and were about to intercept the jutsu, but two people beat them to it. Sweden. Mizoripa. Futon. Senpuken. The combined jutsu of Yakumo and Naruto instantly quelled the raging inferno that was about to consume Satsuki, a large cloud of steam instantly covering the arena. Once it was cleared, everyone immediately felt an even more immense amount of killing intent from Yakumo and Naruto, their aura taking shape behind them, as Menma unconsciously took a step back from the two, seeing the Edo and the dragon. But they didn't act like they were expected to, opting to cast him one more glare before rushing to their down teammate, supporting her gently as Yakumo immediately started healing her. Standing up, Naruto looked at Hayate and nodded. Knowing what he meant, Hayate signaled that Menma had won. Once Satsuki was carted away by the medics, Yakumo and Naruto stared at the doors that she left through. Slowly they made their way back to the stands, as everyone gave them a wide berth, fear creeping into their hearts from the subtle yet frightening killing intent oozing off of them. But it quickly ended when the screen showed the next combatants. Mito vs. Isui. Isui, the only remaining ninja from AIM, raised his hand as he forfeited, not wanting to face Mito after seeing what her family had done. Hayate nodded as he acknowledged Mito as the winner. As they made it back, the screen flashed and showcased the final combatants. Naruto vs. Dosu. Looking at the screen, Naruto jumped down to the floor of the arena as Dosu slowly made his way down. On the floor, Naruto and Dosu stood, one blank-faced but subtly angry, the other visibly nervous. Looking at the two, Hayate signaled for them to begin. Dosu jumped back to get some distance from Naruto, but he widened his eyes when he bumped into someone. Without turning around, he knew who it was. Before he could get away, pain exploded from his back, Naruto having buried his fist with tremendous power into it. As he was lifted slightly into the air from the force of the blow, Naruto simply brought his foot up and slammed it into his head, sending him crashing into the ground. After removing his foot, a small amount of blood started to pool around Dosu's head as Hayate quickly called the end of the match, signaling the medics to take care of the bleeding. Slowly, Naruto made his way back to stands as everyone stared at him with a mix of shock and fear. It took him less than 30 seconds to crush the same person who brought him to his knees at the start of the exam. Once everyone was taken care of, Minato called the end of the preliminaries, gathering all the genin who won their matches. Standing in front of him was Temari, Shikamaru, Sasuke, Gaara, Narumi, Mito, Menma, Neji, Kankuro, Yakumo, and Naruto. Congratulations for making it through the preliminaries, you all. Now, however, we will be drawing for who you will be battling in the finals, which will take place 1 month from now. So please, come forward and draw. Minato said, as he gestured towards a box with the names of all those present in it. One by one, they approached the box and drew. Finally, the pairing was complete. In order, it was as followed: Temari vs. Shikamaru, Narumi vs. Neji, Gaara vs. Kankuro, Mito vs. Yakumo, and the final match was Sasuke vs. Menma vs. Naruto. Everyone was stunned by the final match. Menma and Sasuke gulped slightly and widened their eyes when they saw Naruto's eyes flash electric blue for a second. Finally, the preliminaries were finished as Minato dismissed them all, reminding them that in 1 month the finals would take place. Once again, everyone, the finals will take place in 1 month's time, so take the month to train and polish up your skills before you face your next opponent. Minato said, finally dismissing the genin. Scene change. Infirmary. After they were dismissed, Yakumo and Naruto immediately made their way to the infirmary with the rest of the genin minus the Sunanin. Arriving, they saw that everyone minus Zaku, Dosu and Yasuo were wide awake and startled when they saw the large group. Satsuki. Yakumo shouted, running to her best friend and fretted over her as everyone laughed at the scene. I'm fine, Yakumo, just a little banged up, she said, wincing slightly from moving her arm, which had a fracture in it. As everyone was catching up with their teammates and friends, Naruto saw Kin sneaking glances at him. Once he locked eyes with her, she quickly averted her gaze. Shaking his head slightly, Naruto made his way over to her as everyone quieted and looked at him. Assuming that he was going to hurt her, they were about to stop him but froze when he stopped by her bed and leaned a little closer before speaking. You all right, Kin? He asked, tilting his head slightly as she blushed and looked at her sheets. I'm fine, Naruto-kun. Just a little sore is all, she said in a bashful tone as she timidly raised her head to stare at him with eye full of adoration. Everyone dropped their jaws at the scene, as the Minato along with the Jonin-sensei, Zabuza, Anko, Tsunade, Shizune and Haku, who was working as one of the medical staff, entered the room curious as to what was going on. But before they could ask, Kin slowly rose a little and kissed Naruto once again, planting a kiss on his other cheek as he froze, his eyes wide open. Seeing what just happened, they got their answer. Haku dropping her tray of medical equipment as her hands started trembling, a devastated look on her now shocked and angry face. Yakumo, Mito, and Narumi felt their souls leave their bodies as they paled. Satsuki looked like she could pass out at any moment, horror etched onto her face. For the other genin, they resembled fishes with the way they opened and closed their mouths. The adults looked confused and shocked as well. Minato couldn't believe what just happened. His son, the blank and cold Naruto, just got kissed, and by a cute foreign girl no less. Tsunade gave a worried look at her now pale student. Anko a look of bewilderment on her face, trying to speak but unable to form words. Zabuza looked like he was going to kill, having seen the devastated look on his daughter's face. And Shizune gained a blank look in her eyes as the world seemed to lose all traces of color and sound. What? Why'd you do that? Naruto asked, standing straight again as he put a hand to his now pink cheek. Kin just smiled at the question, tilting her head in a cute way before answering. Don't you remember? Because I like you, Naruto-kin. Kin said, a crimson blush and a serene smile on her face. But before anyone else could speak or do anything, Kiba shouted and pointed his finger at Kin. It was you. You're the one who marked him. He screamed, jealousy burning in his eyes as everyone quieted at the new piece of information. Looking at the now quiet group, Kin looked back at Naruto and tilted her head in a cute manner before speaking. Era.